I just carved your car to shreds. That piece of junk suits you better than anything else. I froze in the kitchen, my hand gripping the phone until my knuckles went white. My daughter-in-law's voice was sweet but poisonous, like a snake bite. For 3 years I gave her a roof, meals, and called her my daughter. And this is how she repays me. I took a deep breath and kept my tone even. "Honey, I sold that silver Nissan 3 months ago," she snapped. "Sold it to who?" I answered gently. "To a retired state police colonel. The kind who never lets property damage slide." Heavy silence fell. Then sirens wailed. I set the phone down and smiled faintly. "Truth is, sweetheart, I'm done being afraid of losing anything. Now it's your turn to learn how to lose." But before the police knocked on my daughter-in-law's door, let me tell you how a 62-year-old woman who was looked down on learned to strike back with brains and dignity. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Marilyn Cooper, 62, living alone in a quiet suburb of Savannah, Georgia. My 2-story wooden house sits between tall pines and a bougainvillea trellis off the porch. I've been here 38 years since my husband Frank was alive. We built each step, painted each plank, and planted lavender along the little walk. 7 years since he passed, I've kept everything the same as if he just stepped out for a morning coffee. Frank used to say, "This house is where you belong, Marilyn," and I believed it until Brielle walked into our lives. 3 years ago, my only son Lucas brought Brielle over to meet me. I still remember that soft, sunny afternoon, the kitchen smelling of apple pie. She showed up in a navy dress, bright smile, and lively eyes. "Mom, Marilyn, Lucas says you make the best chicken pot pie in Savannah," she said, sweet enough to soften my heart. For the first time in years, my home filled with laughter. She helped set the table, asked about the past, and praised the complete old wedding photo of me and Frank. I watched Lucas smile, and relief washed over me. A widowed mother can't ask for more than to see her child loved. Just 6 months later, they announced their engagement. Lucas said they wanted a small outdoor wedding, but when I saw Brielle flipping through bridal magazines with white gowns costing thousands of dollars, I knew it wouldn't be small at all. I withdrew a large chunk of my retirement savings, the money Frank and I had planned to use to redo the porch to give my son his dream wedding. I told myself it was the last gift from his father, delivered through me. The wedding was on a brilliant May day. In the golden sunlight, I watched Lucas and Brielle exchange vows, tears streaming down my face. I was proud, happy, and a little empty. When they left for a honeymoon in Charleston, I wrapped a small gift, our wedding photo and a handwritten card. Marriage isn't finding a perfect person, it's learning to love on imperfect days. I didn't know that, a few months later. That saying would twist back like a knife into my own heart. After they returned, things started to change. Brielle often looked around my house with an appraiser's eye, like she was scouting a property waiting for a flip. "Have you ever thought about selling these old things? The curtains are dated, and the wood floors are all scratched," she said with a light laugh. I answered, "They're as old as I am, but as solid as day one." Brielle shrugged. "I just think you should live simpler. This house is too big for just you." That sentence might have sounded harmless, but the look in her eyes chilled me. From then on, the visits tapered off. She always had excuses, busy with a project, on a work trip, and Lucas stayed stuck in the middle, awkward and evasive. Each time she came by, she brought a new idea. If we lived closer to downtown, it'd be better for work. "Maybe let us stay with you for a while to save on rent." I smiled and deflected. "I'm used to the quiet. Probably not a good match for young people's pace." Brielle gave a thin smile. "Sure, I get it. Keeping such a big house all to yourself must be lonely." I realized that behind the concern was ambition dressed up as politeness. Lucas started to change. The boy who used to call every morning to ask, "Mom, did you have breakfast?" now replied to texts with a few clipped words. I felt the gap widen not between generations, but between love and scheming. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Dolores King, knocked. She spoke softly. "Marilyn, I've seen your daughter-in-law taking pictures of your house several times. Inside, and the address numbers too." I just stood still, my heart thudding. I began to write down every detail: the day Brielle asked about the deed, when she helped herself to my drawer looking for invoices, the way she watched whenever I opened the safe. I'm not a suspicious person, but a woman who taught classes for 30 years knows this. When someone starts collecting information, they're building a plan. Then came Lucas's 30th birthday. When I came back from the market, the front door was wide open and music was blaring. I walked in and went cold. In the living room, a big buffet table with food, wine glasses, flowers, and strangers laughing. In the middle stood Brielle in a red dress, raising a glass. "Happy birthday to my husband and cheers to our new home." Applause erupted. I stood there holding a bag of limes and herbs. A stranger turned to me. "And you are?" Brielle smiled. "Oh, she's the old tenant who hasn't moved out yet." The room burst into laughter. In that moment, I didn't cry or shout. I set the groceries down, walked straight to my bedroom, and closed the door. The last light of day came through the curtains, falling across Frank's photo. I looked at him for a long time and choked out, I've forgotten who I am, honey." But I haven't. I sat at my desk, opened the old notebook. The first line I wrote, "June 12th, begin the counterattack." From that moment, I wasn't a passive target anymore. I, Marilyn Cooper, would be the one setting the trap. Sunday dinners, once our family tradition, started disappearing like steam after a rain. Before, right at 6, I always set the table, laid out the lace runner Frank picked in New Orleans, and waited for Lucas to knock. Now, it was just me and the ticking wall clock. "This week, Brielle and I already have plans with friends, Mom." "Next week for sure," Lucas said over the phone, rushed. Next week, then the week after that. The reasons kept changing: new project, client dinner, Brielle's under the weather. I said nothing more, just, "Okay, I understand." But the truth is, I understood more than Lucas thought. One evening, while I was steeping chamomile tea, Brielle stopped by alone. She wore a fitted dress, designer bag on her arm, standing in the kitchen doorway like she owned the place. "Have you ever thought about upgrading your living situation?" she asked, friendly yet off. "Upgrading?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, the house is a bit old, the floors creak, the walls are damp. If you want, Lucas and I can help. Turn it into a modern place and sell it for a good price. You could move somewhere more convenient, smaller. Wouldn't that be better for you?" I set my cup on the table and looked at her. "This house is good for me. It's my home." Brielle smiled, a smile thin as a blade. "You're really selfish. People want to help and you won't let them. It's a big house and you live here alone. Isn't that wasteful?" That line was like a pin, not because it insulted me, but because there was no respect left in her voice. I didn't answer. I opened the back door to let the breeze in. The scent of pine and lavender pushed out her heavy perfume. Lucas drifted farther. He called less, texted in fragments, even forgot my birthday for the first time in 31 years. When I called, his voice sounded tired. "Mom, I'm slammed. I'm on a new project. Brielle's stressed too. Please don't add pressure on her." "Add pressure." I let out a short laugh after hanging up. Me, the woman who taught him right from wrong, now labeled emotional burden. One June afternoon, Mrs. Dolores King, my next-door neighbor, came over. She's in her 70s, trims roses, and knows everything on the block. "Marilyn," she said, lowered her voice like sharing a secret. "Yesterday I saw your daughter-in-law in your yard, taking pictures. A lot. The front, the windows. I jolted. When? Around noon. You were out. I thought maybe you asked her to take photos to list the house. But I don't think so. That line made my blood run cold. I smiled my thanks, but inside, a storm rose. That night, I opened my notebook and started logging everything. June 18th, Brielle photographed the house while I was out. June 20th, asked Lucas, he said, probably for a design project. June 23rd, Brielle called me stubborn for refusing to talk about future housing. Each shaky line under the lamp was a small piece of evidence for a truth I didn't want to face. They didn't just want to live with me. They wanted to own it all. The next Saturday, I invited them over for dinner, a healing family meal. I made honey-roasted chicken, multigrain bread, and Lucas's favorite dessert, lemon cake with frosting. When they arrived, I could see Lucas's eyes had changed, tired. And Brielle moved through my kitchen like it was hers. I think you should let us stay here for a while. Just a few months, until we find a new place. I looked at her and kept my voice gentle. Your place downtown is better than this. But it's too small, Mom. And this, she swept her eyes. Around the room, spacious, quiet. You wouldn't be alone anymore. Win-win. I set my fork down and looked straight at her. Brielle, sometimes quiet is the only thing a widow has left. The air froze. Lucas stared at his plate. Brielle gave a dry laugh. Or are you afraid of losing control? I answered softly, no, I'm afraid of losing peace. Dinner ended in silence. As they left, I heard Brielle whisper to Lucas at the door, she won't budge, but eventually she will. That night I sat on the sofa under a warm yellow lamp. I missed Frank. If he were here, he'd know how to talk to Lucas. But it was just me. I opened my phone and read an old text from my son. Mom, don't worry, I'm always here. Now, every time I read it, I felt nothing but emptiness. I asked myself, when did gratitude turn into entitlement? When did a mother's help become a debt a child can collect? I started pretending to be frail. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to see what they would do if they thought I wasn't sharp anymore. I forgot to turn off the porch light, asked the same question twice, sometimes called Lucas early just to ask what day it is. Brielle acted annoyed, but her eyes lit up every time I misspoke. Every time I laughed it off as memory getting worse with age. One evening, when Lucas stopped by alone, he looked around and spoke quietly. Mom, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should think about moving somewhere more convenient. With care, Brielle knows some great centers. I looked at my son, my heart tightening. Son, my body's older, not my backbone. And I still remember everything, especially when people want me to forget. Lucas fell silent. I knew he understood who I meant. The next day, while I was sweeping the porch, Mrs. Dolores came again, speaking low. They came this morning while you were at the store. Walked around the house, measuring things. I saw Brielle holding a notebook, and Lucas taking pictures of the fence. I set the broom down and looked toward their place across the street. A window curtain shifted, someone was watching back. In that moment, I knew the fight had begun. It wasn't about a house or assets anymore. It was about trust, honor, and the dignity of a mother who gave her life to her family. I went inside, locked the door, and stood in the stillness. A breeze touched our wedding photo. The wooden frame swayed lightly as if reminding me, Marilyn, you may be older, but you don't bow. I looked around the room, the scuffed floorboards, the old chairs, and felt strength rise. Not anger, resolve. I pulled the notebook close, flipped to a new page, and wrote clearly, July 2nd they want to take. I'll let them think they're about to win. I set the pen down, closed my eyes, and whispered, Frank, I'm not alone anymore. This battle I'll fight with both our minds. And in that old wooden house on a quiet street, a 62-year-old woman began preparing for the first counterattack of her life. When Mrs. Joanne Patel called, her voice a little weary, I knew it wasn't simple. Joanne isn't just an old friend, she's the notary I've trusted since my PTA days. She says things straight and doesn't sugarcoat. Marilyn, better sit down for this, she said. Today someone requested a certified copy of your property deed. I nearly dropped the kettle. Who requested it? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. It's under the last name Collins, first name Brielle Collins. My heart skipped. I know Brielle is my daughter-in-law, but the thought of her pulling the deed to my house through a notary office twisted my insides. I hurried to Joanne's office to hear it and see it with my own eyes. Joanne handed me a photocopy. The ink was faded, the office stamp light. On top was a request for a certified copy of the certificate of ownership for the house at 12 Willow Lane, owner, Marilyn A. Cooper. In the power of attorney section, there was a signature with familiar loops. But it wasn't mine. I compared it to your signature on file, Joanne said. It doesn't match. This is a forged signature. I studied each stroke, then felt my hands go cold. After years of signing budget ledgers, invoices, every kind of paper, I knew the difference. The signature on that form was warped and rushed, like someone signing under pressure. A wave of betrayal hit me. Everything I'd built over a lifetime, and someone tried to copy my name to do harm. Joanne flipped to the next page, her face serious. The requester is listed as Brielle Collins at apartment 4B. They also attached a power of attorney template, apparently to copy or replace the original title documents. I bit my lip, steadying myself. Being conned teaches a harsh lesson. Trust can be exploited, and sometimes the person who hurts you is the one you once loved. I called Maya Brooks right away, my niece who'd come down from New York after hearing what happened. Maya's an attorney patient and sharp. When I told her, she came to my house within half a day, laptop in one hand and a bag stuffed with legal pads in the other. Maya read the request closely, her eyes scanning fast. They're trying to lay the groundwork to declare you legally incapacitated, she said bluntly. This power of attorney form can be used as supporting evidence, especially if they line up a medical note to back it. I sat at the table, numb. The idea of being labeled no longer competent just because of a few lies made me feel voiceless. I raised my son, kept this family going, paid every tuition bill for Lucas. Now someone could pair a forged signature with a doctor's embellishment and take everything? Maya went on. Brielle and Lucas could be working in tandem, one pushing the legal angle, the other using pity to manipulate. If they get a medical dot of the medical go, the result saying you have cognitive decline, a court can appoint a temporary guardian. What does that mean specifically? I asked, my voice shaking. If they persuade enough people that you're not lucid, they can petition the court to appoint a representative to manage your assets, which means they could control your bank accounts, property, even sell the house. You need to act now. Make a new will. Lock down access to your current accounts, and name a trusted person as your emergency agent, but only because you choose it, not because someone forces you. I nodded. Those words touched my fear and opened a way out at the same time. I couldn't let things happen the way they wanted. Maya dug deeper, and a fact came out that took my breath away. She checked public records, and the young couple's total debt was about $180,000, mostly a car loan, credit cards, and a failed investment contract. They have a clear motive to find a big pile of money, Maya said. And this house is the life raft. According to a recent real estate appraisal, my house in Savannah is worth about $850,000. Hearing that number, my chest tightened. It isn't just a dollar amount, it's nearly 40 years of life, of happiness and loss. And to them, that money could wipe out their debt and give them a fresh start by wiping me out. I replayed every detail. Brielle always hinting about upgrading the house, Lucas suddenly taking interest in the utility bills, and the look in her eyes when she walked into my living room, the look of someone pricing a thing. Not loving a home. I understood. If I didn't respond, I would lose everything. Not because they'd snatch it by force, but because they'd make the theft legal by smearing my competence. Maya and I spent hours drawing up a plan. She told me to make a new will, appoint an independent overseer, and spell out, "No one may represent me in any financial transaction without valid medical verification and a court certification. I should also move all my savings into a new account known only to me and Maya. The fewer traces at the old bank, the harder it is for them to access," she said. Then she suggested I record a life estate, meaning I still have full rights to live in and manage the house until I die, no matter what names end up on paperwork later. I'd never heard of it, but the idea made me exhale. "Last thing," Maya said. "We need evidence, not suspicion, something that holds up in court. They've already left traces, the forged signature, notary records, and most importantly, motive. But the heaviest weight is still their own words." I looked at Maya and spoke slowly. "You mean make them confess?" "Exactly. Not by forcing them. Make them think you've gotten weaker, let your guard down. When they feel safe, they'll say everything, and that's when we record it, store it, and have evidence they can't deny." I sat quietly in the living room after Maya left. The last light of day hit the wedding photo of me and Frank, making the glass glint. I brushed the oak frame and whispered, "Honey, I'll keep my promise. I'll protect this home." I knew I couldn't fight with brawn, but I could fight with my mind, the very thing Brielle most underestimated in me. I didn't sleep that night. I opened a small notebook and wrote out each step. Step 1, new will and new accounts. Step 2, record a life estate. Step 3, monitor Brielle and Lucas's actions. Step 4, create chances for them to reveal their true intent. I closed the notebook and slid it into the drawer beneath the hand-embroidered cloth. Next to it was Frank's wedding ring, a reminder that I had once fought to keep our happiness, and I would do it again. Before turning off the light, I whispered into the dark, "They think I'm weak, but this weakness will be the trap." And that night, in the quiet wooden house in Savannah, I began to sketch the first lines of my counterattack. My nephew Tyler Nguyen is a security tech, just 26, quick and discreet. He's the son of my late sister, the little boy who used to play Lego under our coffee table when Frank and I were young. Tyler still calls me Aunt M and keeps the habit of visiting every weekend with a bag of freshly roasted coffee beans. When I told him everything, he didn't look surprised. He just spoke softly, steady. "Bad people always assume older folks can't protect themselves, Aunt Marilyn, but they forget technology can be on the side of what's right, too." 3 days later, Tyler brought a cookie tin. Inside wasn't cookies, but 3 hidden cameras as small as a fingertip disguised as a wall clock, an outlet, and a faux flower vase for the dining table. He checked the wiring and said, "They record audio and video and back up to the cloud. You can watch on your phone, but I suggest you don't. Let them think you know nothing." I nodded. Something cold and slow moved in my breathing as I looked at those tiny devices. Part of me hurt having to use cameras to watch my own family, but another part knew that without this, I'd be erased from my own life. I decided to set the bait myself. One morning, I called Brielle. "Honey, I think I should make a spare key. If I misplace mine, you can help me get in." Brielle sounded more eager than I expected. "Oh, of course, Mom. I'll keep it for you." I took the copy to her. When the key dropped into her palm, I saw that look, the look of someone who just grabbed control. "Now you can relax," she said, smiling thin as a razor. I answered softly, "Yes, I'm very relaxed." As the door closed, I turned away, my chest trembling with anger. But for the first time, my fear had turned into a clear plan. Over the next days, I started acting forgetful. I forgot to turn off the stove, let a pot boil, dry and burn, then called Lucas to check. I told the same story about Frank, how he was out back watering the garden just to watch their reactions. Lucas watched me quietly, his eyes a mix of pity and doubt. Every time I gave a weak laugh or misstated a date, that look sharpened. Brielle, though, started to look pleased. One afternoon, I was reading the paper in the living room. The door clicked and Brielle's heels tapped across the floor. She thought I didn't notice. She circled the room, looked in corners, picked up frames, peeked in a drawer. After she left, I checked my phone. The camera hidden in the vase had it all. Brielle rummaging, opening the drawer with old invoices and a couple of notebooks. I hit save on the clip, feeling both hurt and strangely numb. I'd gotten so used to being wounded that the tears didn't come anymore. 2 weeks later, Lucas came with Brielle. They brought a bag of takeout. Near the end of dinner, I heard Brielle's voice, soft but clear enough for the camera. "Lucas, you need to get Mom in for a neuro check soon. I don't think she's okay." If a doctor confirms it, the power of attorney gets easier. I sat there quietly, sprinkling salt on the mashed potatoes as if I'd heard nothing. Lucas stayed silent. I didn't know what was in his head, fear, complicity, or just exhaustion. But I knew one thing. The camera heard everything. That night, I took the next step in my plan, moving all the money. I sat at the computer, the screen light on my older face. My hands trembled a bit, but every keystroke was decisive. I moved nearly $280,000 retirement, insurance, and Frank's savings into a new joint account with Maya. I left only a few $100s in the old account, just enough to keep up appearances. When I finished, I leaned back and closed my eyes. It wasn't just a bank transaction, it was pulling power out of the hands trying to seize it. Some might call me cold. They don't know I'm learning how to survive in my own home. What do you think? Do we sometimes have to be that cold to protect what's right? Tell me in the comments. The next day, I met Joanne Patel at her office. On her desk was a stack of papers, the updated will, the life estate recording, and a memo from Maya. Joanne read slowly, every word. Lucas Cooper inherits only if there is no evidence of coercion, deception, or fraudulent conduct related to the property owner. In any other case, inheritance is revoked. I signed, the pen moving slow but firm. This time, no shaking. "Want me to seal the file here?" Joanne asked. "Absolutely. And only open it when I ask, or when Maya is with me." Joanne nodded, stamped the red seal, tucked everything in a sealed envelope, and locked it in the safe. "I'll keep it secure. And Marilyn, you're doing the right thing." I smiled, tired but genuine. "I'm just learning to protect myself." That evening, I stood in the kitchen with the small light on, looking at the house resting under warm yellow. The smell of old wood mixed with cinnamon and coffee, the scent of calmer years. From today on, this house would be protected by something stronger than a deadbolt, the law and preparation. I looked up at the ceiling where the tiny hidden camera glowed a faint red. "Frank," I whispered, "see it? I've set watchful eyes to keep our home. I'm not afraid anymore." Night air slipped through the window frame, carrying crickets and the lavender from the yard. I smiled. Everything was ready. 3 days later, Brielle dropped by. She brought a gift box, said it was pie from your favorite shop. I opened it, a store-bought apple pie, the very thing she knows I'm allergic to. She smiled, fake sweet. "You need to watch what you eat, Mom. At your age, memory goes quick." I looked at her, even tone. "Thanks for the reminder. I'm taking note of that every day." She didn't know that in this very kitchen, 3 cameras were running. Every word, every glance, every stiff smile captured, second by second. That night, sitting alone on the porch, I opened my phone and replayed the day's clip. Brielle's face was sharp on screen, her voice so clear it still tightened my chest. But instead of pain, I felt a strange calm. I'd come too far to turn back, and for the first time in years, I didn't see myself as a victim. I was the one moving the pieces, quiet, patient, fully prepared. I turned off the phone, closed the door, and wrote a single line in my diary. August 20th trap set, eyes open. All that's left is for them to walk in. On an early fall morning, as maple leaves started to drift along Willow Lane, Lucas called me, voice soft but stiff. "Mom, Brielle says you've been forgetful lately. We just want to make sure you're okay. Can you come with me tomorrow to see Dr. Leonard Price? He's a specialist in older adults." I knew exactly what that meant. Specialist in older adults is the polite way to say geriatric psych. I answered lightly, like nothing was amiss. "Of course, honey." I'm curious to see how sharp my memory still is. When I hung up, I texted Maya. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Dr. Price's office. Come with me." A few minutes later, she replied, "I'll be there. Stay calm. Let them show themselves." The next morning, I wore a cream linen dress, hair pinned neat. Before leaving, I touched Frank's photo on the little altar and smiled. Let's see how far they'll take this performance today. Dr. Leonard Price's clinic is on the second floor of an old building downtown. The walls are lined with yellowed certificates and photos of him with older patients' faces smiling but tired. Lucas sat beside me in the waiting room, eyes shifting. Brielle held her purse, tapping her phone, glancing at me now and then. Maya arrived right on time, with a folder and a light smile. Dr. Price stepped out. He's in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, a low voice trying to feel trustworthy. "Mrs. Cooper, come in. Your son and daughter-in-law say you've had some forgetful episodes lately." I smiled. "I've heard them say that too, so I came to see if my memory's really that bad." The exam started with easy questions. "Do you know what day it is today?" "I believe it's Tuesday, September 14th, right?" "Correct. Now please repeat these 3 words. Tree window clock." I nodded and repeated them, then waited. He moved on to simple shapes and asked me to copy them. I finished in a few minutes, neat and accurate. "Doctor." Price nodded, then tried another angle. "Can you tell me those 3 words again from the beginning?" I smiled. "Tree window clock. And can you tell me why there isn't a single real window in your office? I noticed all the light is artificial." He looked briefly rattled, not expecting me to be that observant. Brielle frowned. Lucas stayed quiet, holding her hand. When the test ended, Dr. Price shifted tone. He leaned back and spoke slowly. "Mrs. Cooper, I think you're still lucid. However, at your age, it's wise to plan for emergencies. I suggest you sign a temporary financial power of attorney, so if anything happens, someone can help manage your finances." Before I could speak, Maya cut in. Firm. "Respectfully, Mrs. Cooper is fully competent. There's no medical basis to advise a patient to sign such a document at a first visit. If you want to make a recommendation, please put it in the record with a lawful rationale." Silence. Lucas looked up, frowning. "Maya, it's just a standard precaution. You're overreacting." Maya smiled. "I'm doing my job as counsel to protect my client's legal rights." "Doctor." Price cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "I'm only suggesting, not forcing anyone." But Brielle wouldn't let go. "Doctor, my mom forgets a lot. She once burned a whole pot, almost set the stove on fire, and she got lost at the grocery store." I turned to her, voice light but sharp. "Brielle, that's a lot of stories. Do you have proof for any of them?" Maya added. "If so, let's put it in the file with evidence, because this claim affects medical records." Brielle flushed and stared down at her phone. Lucas glanced around, clearly uneasy. Dr. Price coughed, trying to regain control. "All right, let's stop here for today. I'll schedule a more in-depth evaluation after I consult with the family. I knew that meant he wanted to stall time to legitimize what they were doing. I just smiled. "Sure, doctor. Do whatever you think you need to do. I'll be fully prepared next time." Outside, the air felt warm and open. I took a deep breath, like stepping out of a room full of schemes. Lucas drove in silence. Brielle sat stone-faced. Maya gazed out the window beside me. Midway, Lucas spoke softly. "Mom, you overreacted." The doctor was trying to help. I looked at my son, calm. "Honey, when someone wants my signature without telling me the consequences, that's not help. That's taking." Lucas gripped the wheel. "You're seeing us wrong. You're reacting like a sick person, Mom. Everyone can see you need supervision." In the rearview mirror, I looked at him, no anger left, just a quiet sadness. "No, honey, I'm not sick. I'm just hurt that you can't tell the difference between concern and manipulation anymore." No one spoke again until the car stopped at my gate. When I got out, Maya stayed a few extra minutes. She took my hand, voice small but steady. "You did great. They're losing control, and that's when mistakes happen. Don't be angry with Lucas. People who get manipulated are usually the ones who trust most. But now we have what we need. Proof they tried to push a power of attorney." I nodded. "Thank you. Today I learned they're not trying. I can't to talk anymore, they're trying to win." Maya gave a sad smile. "And when winning is all they think about, they'll beat themselves." That night, after eating alone in the kitchen, I made a cup of mint tea, opened my phone, and logged into Tyler's storage account. With one small tap, the videos from the in-house cameras popped up. I chose the clip from last week's dinner where Brielle said, "We have to get Mom in for a neurocheck soon." I listened to her voice again, calmer than ever. Every word had become admissible evidence, and more than that, a confirmation of the entire plan I had sensed. I set down my tea, opened my notebook, and wrote the day's last line. September 17th. They tried to force a signature. Failed. Time to counterattack. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and in the wooden house's quiet darkness, I smiled for the first time in months. Not a victor's smile, but the smile of someone who has taken back the initiative. After that memory exam, I knew one thing: Brielle wouldn't stop. When one scheme fails, people like her find another way, and I had to stay one step ahead. I sat by the window, looking at the silver 2018 Nissan resting quietly in the afternoon sun. Frank used to call it the faithful car, because in 5 years it never gave me trouble. But now, it wasn't just transportation. It was about to become a weapon in my plan. I opened my laptop and listed it on a local marketplace. 2018 Nissan Altima, fully maintained, single female owner, excellent condition. In less than 2 hours, the phone rang. A deep, clear male voice. "Mrs. Cooper? This is Marcus Ellison. I'm a retired state police colonel. I'm interested in the car you posted. May I come see it this afternoon?" From the way he spoke, I knew he was serious. At 3 p.m., he arrived. A man in his 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair, walking with the steadiness of someone trailed by discipline. White button-down fastened to the collar, a steel watch gleaming. He walked around the car, tapped the body, bent to study the paint. "Car's in great shape," he said, a quick smile in his eyes. "You take good care of it. My wife used to fuss over her Camry like that until I let my grandson back it into a light pole, and she was mad at me for a week." I chuckled. "Sometimes a woman only has a few things to tend like herself, Colonel." He nodded, thoughtful for a moment, then said, "I'll buy it. But I do have a flaw. If anyone damages my car, I go after them to the end. I don't let even the smallest scratch slide." I tilted my head and asked, almost casually, "What if someone does it on purpose?" He looked me straight in the eye, voice firm. Then I filed charges immediately, not because of the car's value, but because I hate disrespect of others or of myself. I smiled. Good. My car's about to be in the hands of a principled man. We closed the deal that afternoon. He paid in full by transfer, not a huge amount, but enough for me to deposit into the secret account Maya set up last week. When the colonel took the keys, I said, "I trust this car will be safe with you." He answered softly but steady, "And I trust that if anyone dares hurt you, they'll learn an expensive lesson." That line warmed me not just because a former officer was backing me up, but because it felt like having an ally, even if he didn't yet know the real plan in motion. That evening, I sat in the kitchen under warm light. I placed the old Nissan key, the extra copy I'd kept, right in the center of the table, easy to spot. I knew Brielle would come. Soon. She had a habit of dropping by to check on me, pretending to care while really inspecting. And just as expected, 2 days later, around 4 p.m., came the knock. "Mom, I came to see you." I opened the door, hiding a smile. "Come in, honey." Brielle walked in with strong perfume and a searching gaze. She made small talk, pretended to care about my health, then her eyes settled on the key ring. "Oh, you still keep the Nissan key?" I shrugged, casual. "Habit. Even if I barely drive it now, I leave it there." "I thought you sold it?" I smiled. "Not yet. I'm still thinking." Brielle gave a light laugh, and that sly glint flashed in her eyes. I knew an idea had just formed in her head. 3 days later, on a Saturday morning, I left early. I parked my rental car in a lot near the grocery store 3 blocks from my house. From there, I could see the alley leading to the lot where Colonel Ellison's Nissan sat, exactly where I used to park for years. I held a small pair of binoculars and stayed quiet in the car. The sun climbed, light filtering through branches and flashing on the pavement. Part of me still couldn't believe she'd go that far. But a mother's instincts don't lie. 11:18 a.m. A red sedan stopped, the door opened, and Brielle stepped out. A baseball cap, sunglasses, and something long and shiny in her hand, a large metal key filed to a point. I held my breath. She looked around, then went to the silver Nissan. She crouched slightly and dragged her hand hard along the door, then down the side. The metal-on paint screech was chilling. I raised my phone and snapped 3 shots, then switched to video. Every move, every jagged line gouged into the paint, all of it was clear on screen. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, heavy, strangely calm, no anger. Just confirmation. Everything I'd sensed was true. When Brielle left, I stayed in the car a few more minutes. No cursing, no tears. I simply opened my phone, found Marcus Ellison in my contacts, and hit call. He answered after a few rings. "Mrs. Cooper, is something wrong?" I looked at the shredded car, sunlight skipping across deep gouges like claw marks. "Colonel," I said, slowly, "it's time to make good on your promise." "What do you mean?" "I'll send the video, watch it, and you'll know what to do." His voice dropped, stern. "Understood. I'll take it from here." I hung up and took a long breath. Warm air drifted in through the window with the smell of hot plastic and exhaust, but all I felt was a rare stillness, the calm of knowing the game had turned. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the next name. My finger stopped where it needed to. On the screen, Brielle Collins. I tapped call, watched the light glint in the rear view, and spoke as evenly as if starting a normal conversation. "Okay, Brielle. Let's talk." That afternoon, I sat in the living room, calmer than ever. The last light slid through the curtains, laying pale gold across the floor. The phone on the table rang. Brielle's name lit the screen. I picked up. Her voice was bright, almost satisfied. "Hope you learned your lesson, Marilyn. Your car looks like trash now. Next time, remember who's actually in control." I heard her giggle, music playing in the background. She sounded like she was treating herself for a win. I answered slowly, word by word. Oh, I learned my lesson, Brielle. It's just that car isn't mine anymore. Silence. A few seconds later, her voice came back, tight and raspy. What did you say? I smiled. Still even. I sold that Nissan. The buyer is Colonel Marcus Ellison, retired state police, and I think he'll want to know who just shredded his property. A sharp breath came through the line. Then an engine, a car door slamming. Are you threatening me? She screamed. I answered lightly, No, I'm just telling the truth. And if you still don't believe me, here's one more thing. The cameras recorded everything. Your actions, your face. I hung up. In under 10 minutes, sirens wailed down the street. Through the window, I saw a black and white cruiser pull up by the lot. 2 officers got out with Colonel Ellison. He spoke firmly while playing the video on his phone. They walked to the gouged Nissan, took photos, measured. Brielle stood there pale, hair blown messy by the wind. She tried to say something, but her voice shook too hard to make sense. I didn't go out. I just eased the curtain and watched through the slit. I felt no anger, only a quiet feeling justice. Justice isn't revenge. It's order returning after someone twisted it. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Mom, what are you doing? Why are cops at our place? I didn't reply. I set the phone down and poured more tea. 5 minutes later, a second text. Brielle says you set her up. Did you? I sighed. That's what hurt most, Lucas still believing her with the truth right there. I wouldn't argue by text. 15 minutes later, I heard his car at the gate. He walked in, face torn between anger and confusion. Mom, I need you to explain this. I pointed at the chair. Sit. We talk like two adults. Lucas sat, forcing calm. I don't understand. Brielle says you staged this to get her arrested. She was just checking the car. She didn't do anything. I stayed quiet a moment, then took out my phone and opened Tyler's app. On the screen, a crisp video of Brielle scratching the car, her face tight, eyes full of hate. The metal on paint scrape came through clear. Lucas stared. His face went white. No way. And this, I said, opening the second folder, is the audio from last week's dinner. Brielle's voice filled the room. You need to get Mom in for a neurocheck soon. If the doctor confirms it, the power of attorney gets easier. Lucas dropped his head, hands clenched together, shaking. I spoke slowly. You see, I don't have to invent anything. They said it themselves. After a long while, Lucas looked up, eyes red. I believed her. I thought you were suspicious. I thought you were lonely and imagining things. His voice cracked. She said if I just helped a little, everything would be fine. You call lying, forging signatures, damaging property, and trying to dump your mother in a nursing home helping a little? I asked, not loud, but sharp as a blade. He was silent. A tear fell onto his hand. Mom, I was wrong. I shook my head, still calm. You were wrong, but I'm sorry isn't enough. Forgiveness doesn't come from tears, Lucas. It comes from action. He looked at me like he was waiting for the rest. I set down my cup and met his eyes. If you truly want to make this right, do 3 things. First, divorce. Not because I demand it, but because this marriage is killing you little by little. Second, therapy. You've been manipulated long enough. If you don't look back, you'll repeat this in the next relationship. Third, respect boundaries. I'm not someone you can lean on or control anymore. If you want to stay in my life, come as a grown man, not a child asking for money or pity. Lucas sat still. I saw the fight in his eyes, guilt, shame, and a love he hadn't found words for yet. Finally he nodded, voice hoarse, I'll do it. I don't want to lose you again. I rested my hand on his shoulder. I don't want to lose you, but I won't accept being hurt anymore. We sat like that for a long time. Outside, late light spread across the porch, warming the old family photo Frank alive, Lucas 12, a wide, innocent smile. I looked at it and felt a quiet ache. When Lucas left, He didn't say goodbye. He paused at the door, turned his back to me, and said in a raw voice, "I'll talk to a lawyer. And I'll fix all of it." The door closed, leaving a still space. I knew he was crying, but I didn't follow. Sometimes people need to hurt on their own to learn how to stand. That evening, the phone rang. Colonel Marcus Ellison. "Mrs. Cooper, the young woman has been brought in for a statement. I think you should rest. Things will be clear soon." I nodded softly. "Thank you, Colonel. I owe you not for today's actions, but for helping me believe there are still principled people." He let out a small laugh. "No thanks needed, Mrs. Cooper. I'm just keeping my word. You, on the other hand, did what many can't. You stood up for yourself." After hanging up, I went to the porch and sat in Frank's old wooden chair. Savannah's night sky was clean, a few stars winking in the dark. I sipped my cooled tea, oddly peaceful. The trap had sprung. The truth was out. No more hiding, no more pretending. And in that quiet moment, I realized what made me strong wasn't a clever plan, but the belief that I deserve protection, even if I have to be the one to do it. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the pines, whispering, "Frank, rest easy." I won not by striking back, but by keeping myself. On Monday morning, I arrived at attorney Maya Brooks's office an hour early. Savannah was hushed low gray clouds, fresh air after a night rain, water droplets on car windows catching the weak sun. Maya was already in the conference room with a thick stack of files, neatly labeled assets, forged transactions, video evidence, audio recordings. She looked at me with a light smile and steel in her eyes. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I'm ready," I said, straightening my collar. Right at 9 a.m., Colonel Marcus Ellison walked in, white shirt, navy blazer, steady steps. Behind him came Hal Stein, Brielle's attorney. And finally, Brielle, hair curled into neat waves, face pale, dark circles under her eyes. I looked at her without anger, only tiredness and the sense of someone who had survived a storm. Hal Stein opened his briefcase, voice polite with a touch of forced warmth. "Mrs. Cooper, my client, miss." Brielle Collins wishes to express deep remorse for what happened. She recognizes her actions were impulsive mistakes. We'd like to discuss a resolution. Full restitution for the vehicle damage, a formal written apology, and in return, you withdraw the criminal complaint. That way, both sides can close the past peacefully. Maya glanced at me, waiting. I placed my hands on the table and said evenly, "No." Hal blinked, leaning back slightly in his chair. "I'm sorry. Do you mean—" "I said no," I repeated, slower, clearer. "I've spent too many years believing silence keeps the peace. Turns out it only makes people think I'm weak." The air in the room grew heavy. Brielle squirmed, her hands clenching together. Maya opened the file stack and slid it toward Hal. "Before we discuss settlement, you need to review these. This is evidence of a scheme to forge a power of attorney, including a fake sample of Mrs. Cooper's signature, a request for certified copies of the deed, and an audio recording of Miss Collins planning with her husband." Hal bent to read, his brow tightening. "Are these authenticated?" Maya answered, voice like steel, all notarized, time-stamped, and stored in an independent system. In addition, we have video of the property damage captured by Colonel Ellison's camera and provided by Mrs. Cooper herself. The colonel nodded. "I've forwarded everything to state police. The vandalism case can be filed at any time." The room fell silent. Brielle stared down, biting her lip until it bled. I looked at her and saw the collapse in her eyes. I spoke slowly, each word clear. "Before any apology, I have 5 conditions. If you accept them, I'll agree to let Colonel Ellison withdraw the criminal complaint once every obligation is met. If not, I'll proceed with additional charges for fraud and document forgery." Hal looked up, cautious. "Please state them. I took a breath and turned the page I'd prepared. First, full restitution for all damages, including Colonel Ellison's repair, costs, reputational harm, and legal fees. Second, a written confession, acknowledging all deceit, signed and notarized. Third, finalize the divorce from Lucas Cooper within 30 days. Fourth, a commitment to stay away from me and my property no closer than 650 feet. Fifth, no request for alimony or division of marital assets in any form. I lifted my head and looked Brielle straight on. If you refuse, I will make sure you stand before a judge, not just for a scratched car, but for organized deception. Brielle burst into tears. Not the cry of an arrogant woman, but of someone who knows she just buried her future. She sobbed, choking on words. Mom, Marilyn, I'm sorry. I don't know how it all came to this. I just wanted... I cut in, calm and even. No, it's Mrs. Cooper, thank you. Brielle froze, tears spilling. She understood I had just severed the last thread between us. Hal started to speak, but Colonel Ellison raised a hand. Mr. Stein, I think your client should listen closely to her attorney. Maya followed, cool as ice. Miss Collins, if you accept these conditions, we'll assist the Colonel in filing to withdraw the criminal case after restitution is completed and the divorce is finalized. If not, you're facing 6 months to 2 years in custody, plus a permanent criminal record. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock tick. Hal Stein gave Brielle a small nod. Miss Collins, I advise you to sign. This is the least damaging option. Still sobbing, her hands shaking, Brielle picked up the pen. She looked at me one last time, searching for pity, but I gave none. She signed messy strokes, ink bleeding into the page. When she finished, she slumped into the chair, tears falling non-stop. Maya gathered the papers, crisp and efficient. This becomes legally binding once notarized. Copies go to your attorney and to Colonel Ellison. The Colonel nodded, standing. Once I receive full restitution, I'll file to withdraw the criminal case. I'm doing it for Mrs. Cooper, not for you. Brielle nodded weakly and murmured, I understand. As everyone stood, the room felt lighter, like a ton had been set down. I gathered my bag and rose slowly. Maya set a hand on my shoulder, her voice gentler. You did it. This isn't a win, it's the restoration of what's right. I smiled, small but real. Justice has a price, Maya. I'm paying it with what I've endured. As I turned toward the door, Brielle suddenly spoke, voice raw but bitter. You'll end up alone, Marilyn. Even your son will leave. You'll grow old by yourself. I paused at the threshold, didn't turn, and said softly, Maybe. But at least I'll be free. I pushed the door open and stepped out, leaving behind the sobs and the dry scratch of one last pen stroke in a silent room. Outside, Savannah's sunlight was clear and bright. Last night's rain had washed the dust from the streets, leaving the smell of damp grass and a soft breeze. I drew a deep breath and took the steps slowly. In my bag, the sealed copy of the signed conditions rested like a period at the end of the darkest chapter of my life. There was no gloating, no triumph. Only relief, like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. I knew there wouldn't be many people around me from now on, but that no longer scared me. For the first time in years, I wasn't living out of fear or guilt. I walked on, slow and steady, through the busy street, thinking, justice isn't payback. It's the moment you stop letting others define your worth. After that decisive meeting at Maya's office, my life went quiet. No more midnight calls, no more fake knocks at the door, no more calculated smiles. Just the 2-story wooden house, so still I could hear the living room clock marking time. But the quiet wasn't entirely comfortable. It left a space, and in that space, the name Lucas echoed heavy, confused, aching. My son had left Brielle, just as the agreement required. The divorce went through quickly, no tears, no battles, two people stepping out of each other's lives with a cold sheet of paper. And then, Lucas had nowhere to go. He moved out of the place where I'd once paid the deposit. Work suffered from the rumors around the case. The friends Brielle had introduced kept their distance. I heard he was holed up in a small rental on Savannah's south side, one twin bed, one table, a window facing a parking lot. I didn't visit, not out of anger, but because I knew he needed to face himself. But every Sunday night I sent short texts. Have you eaten? Don't miss rent. Go to bed early. Wake up earlier. No, I miss you. No, I forgive you. I kept clear boundaries so he'd understand love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. One February afternoon, Lucas called. His voice was low and rough, like after a long night. Mom, I started therapy. I was quiet for a few seconds. Good. Were you going to hide that from me? He gave a small laugh. I was afraid you'd think I was performing, but the doctor says I'm emotionally dependent, that I keep looking for someone like you in every relationship, then try to fix them, the way I thought I had to save Brielle. I leaned back in my chair, heart sinking a little. People often confuse love with fear, Lucas. Someone who truly loves doesn't try to fix anyone. He was silent, like he was writing every word down. In the following weeks, Maya told me Lucas had started taking freelance interior design work and was paying down old debts. I didn't help. I didn't send money. I didn't step in. Only once, when he called and asked, Mom, if I can't make it this month, will you help? I answered plainly, I'll help by teaching you how to write a deferment request, not by paying it for you. He gave a strained chuckle. You're never easy. I smiled. What's hard is what we remember. 3 months passed, and Lucas began to change. His voice steadied, less complaining. He started saying, I'm responsible, instead of, I didn't mean to. That didn't come from magic, but from work, loneliness, and awareness, things he'd lacked. One early spring evening, he called me. Mom, this might sound dumb, but I used to think Brielle was an escape. She made me feel seen. I answered softly, You didn't notice she only saw the parts of you that benefited her. When someone loves you because they need something from you, that's not love, that's a transaction. Lucas sighed. I get it now. Maybe I treated you that way too. I said nothing. Sometimes truth needs saying, not dissecting. That night, I wrote in my journal, My son is walking a tightrope. But this time, he isn't blindfolded. And I'll stand below, not to catch him, but to witness. A week later, Lucas stopped by. He was thinner, but his eyes were different, less fear, more calm. He brought white tulips and a bag of fresh roasted coffee. For you. I miss this smell, he said. I took them, smiling lightly. The smell of honesty, I hope. He sat at the kitchen table, where we'd had dozens of tense dinners before. I know I can't apologize forever. I want to do something to make it right, I asked. With words or actions? He met my eyes. Actions. I'll come every Sunday, help fix the backyard, clean out the garage, whatever you need. Just say you'll have dinner with me. I stayed quiet a moment, then said, Okay, but there's one condition. What is it? No lying. Not about the smallest thing. I don't need what's easy to hear. I need what's true. Lucas nodded, voice steady. I promise. Our first Sunday dinner in years was strangely peaceful. I made Frank's favorite stew. Lucas brought dessert from the old place he and his dad used to visit. In the table, we didn't talk about the past. We didn't say her name. We didn't weigh right or wrong. We talked about small things, the jasmine outside, yesterday's rain, and how the hallway light finally got a new bulb. Midway through, Lucas looked up and said softly, I didn't think you'd forgive me. I looked at him, voice barely more than a breath. I don't need to forgive, Lucas. I just need you to learn what took me half a lifetime to understand. Self-respect is the last fence of kindness." He was quiet, eyes shining. When dinner ended, Lucas stood to do the dishes. I watched him from behind, thinner but steady. Something in the kitchen's warm light made me think of Frank, the same calm, the same choice to make amends with deeds, not words. That night, walking him to the door, the air carried the damp smell of earth and dry leaves. He turned back and said quietly, "I'll be back early next Sunday." I nodded, smiling. "Come back, but remember, no lying." He laughed. "I wouldn't dare, Mom." I watched his car taillights fade past the gate, and for the first time in years the house's quiet didn't feel lonely. Because now, silence wasn't emptiness, it was the sign that something was healing. I still remember the first morning after that Sunday dinner with Lucas. Savannah's sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, warming a cup of coffee and the orchid I'd just repotted. Everything was peaceful, truly peaceful, the kind I hadn't dared hope for in years. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life like this, tending the garden, reading, cooking, waiting for Lucas to drop by. But life had another chapter for me, one I hadn't prepared for, but was ready to welcome. One early March afternoon, my longtime neighbor, Mrs. Dolores King, knocked on my door. She carried a basket of still warm muffins, face bright. "Marilyn, you know your story's all over the neighborhood, right?" I paused. "Which story?" "The one where your daughter-in-law tried to take your house, and you fought back with cameras and the law," she whispered, eyes shining. "I shared it with a few women at church. Now everyone wants to ask you how to protect their assets." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "I'm no expert, but you stood up. A lot of women our age get taken advantage of by family and don't know where to start. They need someone like you." I fell quiet. Her words stayed with me. 3 days later, when the knock came again, I wasn't surprised. This time, 3 older women stood on the porch, notebooks in hand, faces a mix of shyness and hope. "We're friends of Mrs. Dolores. She said you could show us how to keep our house papers safe." I invited them in, poured tea, and for 2 hours we talked like old friends. They told me about daughters-in-law holding their passbooks for safekeeping, about being pushed to sign powers of attorney, about family investments. My heart tightened as I listened. When they left, I knew I couldn't stop there. The next week, I pinned a small note on the church board. "Wednesday Women's Group. Learn to protect yourself and your property. Meet at Marilyn Cooper's, 4 p.m. every Wednesday. Bring a notebook and your story." The first meeting had 4, the second, 8, then 12. They brought coffee, pastries, and messy folders. I drafted a survival checklist, a playful name everyone knew was serious. 1. Write a clear will and keep it in 2 trusted places. 2. Keep a list of digital accounts, passwords, and a lawful designated agent. 3. Install in-home cameras within legal guidelines. 4. Name a trusted person outside the family attorney. Close neighbor. 5. Never sign anything you don't fully understand. Each week, we picked a topic from reading contracts and spotting loving scams to recognizing emotional manipulation. The more we shared, the more women spoke up. Some cried from being heard for the first time. Some trembled as they held papers that had been hidden for years. In those wrinkled hands, I saw myself the woman who once shook, once feared, once thought, "I'm old, I should stay quiet." One afternoon, a young woman around 28 came by. She stood at the door with an envelope, voice gentle. "I'm Andrea Collins, Brielle's niece." I stiffened for a moment, but her tone wasn't like Brielle's, no chill, no edge, more like exhaustion. "I'm not here to defend her," she said quickly. "I just want to thank you. If it weren't for your case, my grandmother might never have dared tell the truth." She handed me a handwritten letter, her hands trembling. My grandmother was tricked likely by Brielle into investing in a fake beauty salon. She lost nearly $20,000 and never dared report it to the police. I opened the letter. The handwriting shook, with ink smeared in places. Thank you, woman I've never met, for exposing that devil. Maybe because of you, I'll finally sleep tonight. I set the letter on the table and looked at Andrea. Thank you for bringing it. Would you like to join the Wednesday group? She nodded, eyes wet. I think my grandmother would want me to. That night I told Maya. She went still. You know, this could open a new prosecution. If Andrea's grandmother signs, we can submit more evidence to the DA. 2 weeks later, Maya brought news. 3 more victims have come forward. Same pattern. Brielle preys on trust, builds a fake closeness, then steals assets. I was silent for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because deep down I'd always sensed Brielle wasn't just greedy, she was a structured predator. By month's end, the phone rang. It was Colonel Ellison. Mrs. Cooper, I wanted you to know the DA has opened a separate case against Brielle Collins. I can't share details, but they have enough to dig deeper. Prison. Time is possible. I sat still, looking out at the yard. The wind moved through the leaves, soft as a sigh. I'm not happy about it, Colonel, I said slowly. I just feel at ease. Justice isn't to make someone suffer, it's to reassure others they won't be hurt again, he reflected. You're right. Not everyone understands that line. From then on, the Wednesday women's group kept growing. My living room couldn't hold us, so we moved to the church hall. Mrs. Dolores baked, Andrea handled the printouts, and I sat in the circle saying sentences that seem simple but take forever to learn. I don't agree. I need time to review. I'm saying no. Each time someone said their first real no, everyone clapped. In their eyes, I saw the light I'd once lost, the light of self-respect. One afternoon, as the group broke up, Andrea came to me and asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it, making everything so public?" I smiled. Yes. In those first nights, I wished none of it had happened, but not anymore. Because if I'd stayed silent, more people would be hurt. And the noise you hear, that's the sound of people learning to stand up. She nodded, smiling. You don't know this, but they call you Steel Marilyn. I laughed. Steel rusts too, dear. But once you grind it clean, it shines brighter. That night, I went home, sat by the window, and listened to the crickets in the yard. On the table were thank you notes from women who'd saved their assets and a bouquet of white tulips Lucas had left that afternoon. I wrote in my journal, "Justice isn't only a verdict. Sometimes it's a circle of women who know how to protect themselves, a son relearning honesty, and an old woman finding meaning in the late afternoon of life." I looked up and out the window. Lights came on across the neighborhood, and I knew, even late as it was, a new chapter was starting, one of freedom and sharing. That afternoon, while I was trimming lavender in the garden, a familiar car stopped at the gate. I looked up Lucas. He got out with a folder and a bag of fresh roasted coffee. His smile was tentative, but his eyes were different, steady, grown, no longer dodging. "Are you free?" "I've got something to talk about," he asked. I nodded, smiling slightly. "If it's not about money or Brielle, I'm always free." Lucas laughed, real laughter, not forced. He stepped into the kitchen and set the papers down. "This is my payoff plan. 18 months total. I've run the numbers. If nothing changes, I'll clear every debt before your next birthday." I looked over the budget, every line neat and careful. Income, rent, a set amount for debt, even a small emergency fund. When I finished, my throat tightened. Not because of the math, but because for the first time in years, I saw my son taking responsibility for his own life. "You did this by yourself?" "With help from my therapist and from Maya," Lucas said. "She told me to make a real plan instead of saying, 'I'll try.' So this is my try." I nodded, smiling lightly. All right, I accept this plan, but if you're about to ask me to sign something else, that's not a given. Lucas shook his head and pulled out another paper, folded neatly. No signature needed. This one's mine. I opened it. A printout from the law office, renunciation of inheritance during the lifetime of Mrs. Marilyn Cooper. Below was Lucas's signature, clean and firm. I froze, eyes blurring. Lucas, you... He set a hand on my shoulder, voice steady. Mom, I don't want anything but your peace. Everything you have, you worked a lifetime to earn. I won't be the reason you fear losing it ever again. I couldn't hold back the tears. I'd thought that day would never come, the day my son understood that love doesn't come with entitlement. You're really growing up, I whispered, smiling through tears, and I finally get to be the mother of a man, not of a boy. The afternoon slipped by like smoke. We decided to go grocery shopping together for the first time in almost 7 years. Lucas pushed the cart. I picked vegetables. We laughed at little things. A squashed loaf, a cashier who talked a mile a minute, me forgetting my canvas bags again. Mom, I haven't seen you smile this much, Lucas said as we stood in line. Maybe because I don't have to be on guard today, I answered. I just get to be a mom. We brought home bags full cold cuts, fresh greens, eggs, and waffle mix. Lucas insisted on cooking. Time I made up for all those years you cooked alone. I didn't argue. I let him fumble through the kitchen, clumsy but determined. As butter melted in the pan and that warm, sweet smell filled the house, I realized healing doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it's as simple as this. Before dinner, I set 3 plates and turned to Lucas. You know, we need 3 new rules for this relationship. Rules? You still sound like a lawyer, he joked. I said, honesty, respect, no toxicity. If any one of those breaks, I step back. Lucas nodded, solemn, like he was signing a contract. Deal. And if I break them, you can ban me from waffles for life. We laughed, our laughter carrying through the kitchen, warm as those summers when Frank was still here. Over dinner, Lucas talked about therapy. He spoke about the guilt that still clung to him every night. Mom, sometimes I look in the mirror and still see a traitor. I don't know how to forgive myself. I looked at my son, tired eyes, but honest. Lucas, guilt is only useful if you turn it into action. Otherwise, it's just another shackle. You don't need forgiveness, you need responsibility and forward motion. He nodded, biting his lip. I'm trying. Good, I don't want you living to atone, I want you living to beg. After dinner, I wrote a small note, my hand shaky but clear. I love you, but I love myself too. I folded it and handed it to him. Keep it in your wallet. When you feel lost, read it. Lucas held it for a long moment, then tucked it behind the photo of me and Frank. I'll carry it like a vow. I didn't answer, just rested my hand on his shoulder, feeling that warmth I'd feared was gone forever. That evening I invited Colonel Marcus Ellison and Joanne Patel for dinner. They'd become close friends, quiet companions through the storm. The colonel brought a bottle of red. Joanne arrived with a bundle of dried lavender. I think this house needs more of the scent of peace, she said with a bright smile. Lucas opened the door, shook the colonel's hand, polite and steady. Watching them, I felt lighter. Maybe for the first time in years, my kitchen held both life and calm at once. The waffles were done, sweet and buttery, scent mixing with cinnamon. The colonel ate and laughed. Mrs. Cooper, next time open a bakery. I'll be your first regular, Joanne added, and I'll handle your business license. Across the table, Lucas looked around and said softly, I don't remember a dinner that felt like this light, real, not trying to prove anything. I smiled at him. That's simple happiness, son. The kind I had to travel a long way to find again. After our guests left, I stood on the porch, moonlight washing over the lavender. In the kitchen, the scent of waffles lingered and soft jazz played while Lucas did the dishes. I closed my eyes and let myself settle into the sound. No booming victory, no dramatic finale. Just a peaceful night when I knew things were finally set right. I whispered to Frank in my heart, "See? We have a real home again, not because of walls and roof, but because love returned, whole and unafraid." That morning, Savannah sunlight poured down like honey. Lucas and I stood in the yard, hands dirty, planting climbing roses along the wooden fence. The smell of damp soil, fertilizer, and new sun folded into one, a feeling I hadn't had in a long time, a true beginning. Bent over with a small spade, Lucas mounded earth around a root ball, voice easy as the breeze. "Mom, if these make it through winter, I'll build a trellis over the porch. Next year's going to be beautiful." I watched my son sweat on his brow, strong hands, and felt as calm as a lake after a storm. "Care for them honestly and they'll live, Lucas. Same with you, sometimes people just need time and the right light." He looked up and smiled. "I've got both now, Mom." News about Brielle still popped up in the local paper now and then. My chest didn't tighten anymore. The latest piece said she was facing another lawsuit, this time over an investment scam. Maya texted, "If convicted, she might actually serve time." I replied, "I hope she learns the lesson not in prison, but in her conscience." No one can reclaim the past, but I believe sometimes justice lives in the moment you realize there's no one left to blame. Days slipped into an easy rhythm. The Wednesday Women's Group had 20 members now, all ages from an 82-year-old widow to a 30-something bank clerk. We didn't just cover documents and laws, we practiced emotional self-defense, how to say no, how to hold boundaries, how to leave without guilt. At one meeting, Andrea Brielle's niece stood and shared, "I used to think older women were fragile. After meeting Mrs. Marilyn, I know they just needed a guide. And today, I want to be that for my grandmother." The room applauded, and I simply smiled, light as air. It turns out a personal tragedy can be a seed for wider change. That night I opened my journal, the old leather one Frank gave me for our 20th anniversary. On its time-darkened pages, I wrote 3 words: home, power, dignity. 3 short words, but the sum of everything I'd walked through. Home, not just shelter, but the safe ground I rebuilt with wit and courage. Power, not from youth, but from facing and not running. Dignity, the thing I lost when I bowed my head, and found again when I lifted it. Looking back, I no longer shook at the shameful memories. The tears of those years no longer burned, they tasted like experience of a life lived and still standing. One afternoon, resting on the porch after gardening, Lucas watched the new roses and asked quietly, "Mom, do you ever get tired of having to be strong all the time?" I smiled, gentle but firm. "Being older doesn't mean being weak, son. I only get tired when I'm forced to prove that to someone who doesn't deserve to hear it." Lucas nodded and said softly, "I know now, Mom." I looked at him and smiled. "We don't erase the past, Lucas. We fix the future. The past, well, it's proof we've lived long enough to learn that." I stood, went inside, and poured a cup of mint tea. The fresh scent drifted through the kitchen, a place that once held harsh words, now filled with laughter and waffles every weekend. Outside, the climbing roses had begun to curl up the fence, reaching for the sunlight like they wanted to bloom a little more. I leaned against the doorframe, looked out at the garden, and smiled. At last, freedom had a scent of its own. And if you're still here with me now, tell me where you're listening from. Every comment you leave is a warm footprint on my path. If this story made you think of someone, a mom, a grandmother, or even yourself, please like, share, and subscribe so I know you're still here, keeping the flame of kindness and dignity with me. Thank you for staying with me to the end so I wouldn't have to tell this alone. I took a slow sip of tea, listened to the wind through the roses, and felt my heart quiet and whole. No blazing victory, no showy glory, just a 62-year-old woman, standing in the morning light, knowing she survived, is loved, and is free. At my husband's funeral, my son, a young, wealthy businessman who's always in a rush, walked up to me with eyes gentle, yet distant. He squeezed my hand and said proudly, "Mom, I just want to make sure you're comfortable in the mansion I bought for you." I froze. My heart sank. What mansion? For the past 2 years, I've still been in the old 4B apartment, the one with peeling floors, a leaky roof whenever it rains, and I've been living on my husband's modest pension. My daughter-in-law stepped closer, a fitted black silk dress, expensive perfume overpowering the floral scent of the service. She smiled slightly, lips red as blood, but her eyes were cold and haughty. I knew that look, the look of someone who has taken what isn't theirs. And when I looked straight at her and calmly asked, "What mansion are you talking about, son?" her smile stalled, frozen in a room suddenly filled with suspicious glances. She didn't know that just a few weeks later, that mansion would become the place where her reputation, her marriage, and the flashy life she built on lies would be buried. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Brenda Cole, 67 years old, widow of a man I loved for almost my entire life, Michael. We lived simply in a small apartment in Davie, Florida, where the hallway always smelled like morning coffee and you could hear kids playing. I wasn't wealthy, but I used to think I was happy because I had a steady family and a successful son people admired. But sometimes what hurts most isn't poverty, it's realizing you've been forgotten inside your own family. And that funeral where I should have only said goodbye to my husband became the day I realized the daughter-in-law I'd tried to love was the one who had taken everything. That morning, weak sunlight came through the funeral home's glass windows in Coral Springs, tinting the white ribbons on the wreaths gold. I sat in the front row, clutching an old handkerchief, the last gift Michael gave me before he passed. We had been together more than 40 years, sharing every pension check, every morning coffee, every sleepless night over medical bills. Michael was calm and steady, but always gentle in the smallest gestures. The day he left, I thought the hardest part of my life was over. Turns out, his funeral was the beginning of the deepest pain I've ever known. Andrew, our only son, stood near the main doors. A black suit hugged his shoulders, an expensive watch catching the light. At 35, he already owned a successful tech company in Miami, praised in the news as a self-made example of the new generation. I used to cry proud tears whenever I saw him on TV. But the more successful he became, the less he was home. Calls got shorter, visits got briefer, replaced by quick notes. "Mom, Serena will swing by to drop you some money for groceries." Serena, Andrew's wife, is the kind of woman who makes people look twice. Golden hair, a perfect smile, and a way of walking like the world should step aside. I tried to love her, the way American mothers-in-law do, look for common ground, compliment the pie she brought, try to believe she truly loved my son. But there are things an older woman can sense without proof. The look of disdain when she saw me use an old wallet. The way she said, "Mom," without ever really meeting my eyes. And now, in Michael's funeral, she stood by my son as if she were the one who had lost the most. She placed a hand on Andrew's shoulder, whispered something, and then, right in that moment, Andrew said the sentence that made the crowded room go silent. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're comfortable in the mansion I bought for you." I thought I misheard. A few seconds stretched as long as a lifetime. Then I answered, voice shaking, "What did you say, Andrew?" I've never lived in any mansion." Andrew frowned, confused. "What do you mean, Mom?" "The house in Coral Gables, the one I bought 2 years ago. I remember you said you loved the backyard." My chest tightened. "Coral Gables? I've never set foot there. For the last 2 years, I've still been in 4B, The old place in Davie where every morning I catch leaks with a plastic bucket. Serena cut in immediately, voice sweet but sharp as a blade. Mom must be confused. She's been forgetful lately, we've been worried. That line rang out clear, like she wanted everyone to hear it. I glanced around, some relatives looked at me, a few nodding with pity. I bit my lip and kept steady. I'm not confused, Serena, I said quietly. I remember every crack in my wall, every hiss in my pipes. If I truly lived in a mansion, I wouldn't be carrying a bucket every night to catch drips. The room went silent. Andrew looked at his wife, then back at me. Serena tightened her grip on her purse and forced a smile. Of course, Mom is just joking. But her eyes said otherwise, darting, startled then, narrowing into a quick, warning glance as if telling Andrew to keep quiet. I'm old, not blind. I know the look of someone hiding a secret, and Serena had just given it away. After the service, when most people had left, Andrew came over, still looking rattled. Mom, he said softly, maybe I should swing by the apartment soon. I thought you'd already moved. No, I'm still there, Andrew. I never left, and I never received any key except the key to 4B. I watched his face tighten. Something was cracking inside the son I've loved all my life. Behind him, Serena stepped up, voice smooth as velvet. Honey, it's your dad's funeral. Can we talk about this later? Mom's just emotional. I turned to her. Serena, I said, calm but firm. I've lived long enough to know when someone's lying. She pressed her lips together, eyes skittering away. Andrew squeezed my shoulder and murmured, Mom, let's get some air. But I didn't want to leave. I wanted this ended now. No, Andrew, I said. If you really bought me a mansion, I want to know why I've never lived there. Serena stepped back, a practiced smile returning. Mom, you're drawing attention. This is your husband's funeral. Exactly, I said slowly. That's why I don't want anything else to be hidden today. Aunt Lillian, Michael's younger sister, happened to walk by and heard it. She stopped, looked at us, then said gently, I just visited Brenda's apartment last week. She still lives there. I even brought her an apple pie. The air froze. Andrew turned fully to his wife, doubt now visible. Serena stood rigid, hands trembling just enough to make her pearl necklace quiver. I took a breath and kept my voice even. Son, I think it's time we talk in private, just the three of us. Andrew nodded and asked a funeral home staffer to open a small back room for family. When the door closed, I looked straight at Serena without blinking. Andrew pulled out his phone. Let me check the closing file. Maybe there's a mix-up somewhere. There's no mix-up, I said, low but steady. Someone has been living in that house. And I believe that person is standing right here. Serena let out a small, brittle laugh, the kind that sounds like breaking glass. Are you accusing me? I know you're hurting, I get it, but I'm not hurting. I cut in. I'm recalling every electric bill, every bank letter, every tax notice that all came to 4B. No one mixed anything up, Serena. Andrew exhaled, scrolling. Mom, here it is. The confirmation for the Coral Gables purchase, signed 2 years ago, recipient Brenda Cole. He paused. Mom, there's your electronic signature. I stared at the screen. That signature wasn't mine. The strokes were straight, stiff, missing the soft loop of my right hand. That isn't my signature, I said quietly. Andrew froze. Serena went pale as if the blood drained from her face. No one spoke for a few seconds. Only the hum of the vent and my heartbeat thudding in my chest. Finally, Andrew whispered, Mom, we need to review everything, including the bank records. Serena turned away, clutching her purse. This isn't the time, she muttered. But Andrew looked right at her, his voice no longer gentle. No, Serena, this is exactly the time. I knew, In that moment, things had started to break. And I also knew that although today was my husband's funeral, another funeral for the lies was being prepared right there in that small room. Andrew sat on the wooden chair by the small table in the family room. The soft yellow light showed the dark circles under his eyes, proof of many sleepless nights. The room smelled of polished wood and funeral flowers, making the air heavier. I stayed standing, hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "Let me show you," Andrew said, pulling out his phone. "Maybe you really forgot. I have photos." I looked at the bright screen. A woman stood in a large kitchen. Sunny light. A stainless steel fridge. A spotless white stone island. She wore a beige sweater and gave a slight smile toward the camera. From a distance, at a glance, she did look like me. Same short gray-streaked hair, a slim frame, hands laced in front. But the longer I looked, the colder I felt. I tilted my head and drew a breath. "Andrew," I said slowly, "that woman is not me." He frowned. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "She looks exactly like you." I pointed to the screen. "Do you see the small scar on my right wrist? I got it slicing apples in 1998. She doesn't have it. And here, I touched my own cheek. I have a tiny freckle on my left cheek. She doesn't." Andrew went still. He zoomed in, eyes scanning the details I named. His face shifted from surprise to confusion. He swiped to the next photo. "This one," he murmured, "in the find yard. Mom, that's the garden you said you loved." I followed his gaze. The woman stood by a blooming rosebush holding a watering can. Behind her, tall palms and a pale stone wall. I had never seen that place. "Son," I said, "I've never stood in any garden like that. I don't know that wall. I don't know those roses." He swallowed. He slid through more images. On a sofa in the living room, opening the garage holding a bouquet. Every shot was the same woman and none were me. The screen's light washed his face paler and paler. Across from us, Serena folded her arms and tried a thin smile. "Honey," she said, high and soft, "I think Mom's mistaken. It's a painful day, her memory might be jumbled." I looked straight at her. "Serena, I am still clear enough to tell the difference between a dream kitchen and my real one, the one with a refrigerator that roars every night and a light bulb that's been flickering since last year." The room seemed to refrigerator. Lock in place. Andrew's eyes flashed, for the first time, with doubt. "Serena," he said slowly, "who is the woman in these photos?" She jolted, lips parting without sound. Then, a thin, forced smile. "Not now. This is your father's funeral." No, Serena." Andrew's voice was low and sharp. "Who is she?" I saw her throat twitch. The hallway outside had started to murmur. Some relatives must have heard a bit. The whispers slipped under the door like small waves. Serena tried to steady herself, her voice trembling. I don't think this is the right time. People are watching." I glanced at Andrew. "Son, if you really want the truth, there's no better time than now." He drew a breath and nodded. "You're right. We clear this up here." I sat, keeping my voice unusually calm. "Andrew, if you truly bought that mansion for me, check the basics, the name on the deed, the utility bills, and the door codes. I've never had any door code except opposite. The one for 4B? Remember? And every utility bill has gone to the same address for 15 years. Andrew turned to his wife. "Do you have the documents, Serena?" She gripped her purse and shook her head. "That's the broker's side. I don't keep them. But I'm sure everything's legit." Mom must be mistaken, really. I exhaled and set my hand on the table, voice steady but firm. "If there's a mistake, it certainly isn't mine. I know every pension dollar, every one of your father's medical costs, every bill I've struggled to pay." Andrew stared at his phone, breathing faster. I remember asking Serena to handle the move for Mom, he said quietly. You told me she'd already moved to Coral Gables and sent me photos. These photos. Serena rushed in. You said Mom asked me to e-sign for her. Remember? My head snapped up. E-sign? I have never signed anything I didn't read, and I don't recall asking anyone to sign for me, especially for a house you said was for me. Serena's face went chalk white. She edged back, scarlet lips trembling. You're misunderstanding. I only wanted to make things quick, you know. Andrew lifted his head. His eyes were different now, no softness, no trust, only the cool clarity of someone who has just realized he's been deceived. Serena, he said, each word dropping like a blade, tell the truth. You're living in that mansion, aren't you? The air turned to lead. I could hear the wall clock tick. Serena stood rigid, swallowing hard. Then, in a thin, cracked voice, she said, Yes, I'm living there. It felt like a punch to the chest. For a moment, all sound vanished. I only saw her lips move and my son's face drain. Andrew dropped into the chair, fists clenched around his phone. God, he exhaled. What did you just say? She stammered. I thought the house was too big for Mom. So I stayed there for a while she remained at the old apartment. I tilted my head, oddly calm. For a while, for 2 years. Serena? She stiffened. You're misunderstanding. Enough. Andrew's voice filled the small room. You've lied to me for 2 years? Serena stepped back, tears welling, but neither of us believed them. I sat still, hands in my lap, the cold spreading from my chest to my fingers. Something in me, something once soft, was cracking, not from despair, but from awakening. I looked straight at her and said, quiet and clear, Do you understand what you just admitted? You lived in the house my son bought for me, while I caught leaks and ate canned soup every night. She wiped at her eyes and forced a smile. Please don't make this bigger than it is. I just wanted everyone to be happy. Andrew's voice broke. What happiness is built on lies, Serena? Out in the hall, the murmurs swelled. I heard someone whisper, What's going on? And footsteps stop outside the door. I turned to my son. Andrew, I said softly, we can't let this slide. Check everything the house records, the transactions, and who actually holds the title. The truth doesn't fear the light. He nodded slowly. His eyes went back to his wife, now only tired and disappointed. Serena bowed her head, voice shrinking. I don't want to discuss this here, please, but I knew every plea was just a way to delay the unavoidable. Because the moment she admitted living in that mansion, the wall propping up their marriage cracked, and I knew it would all collapse soon. Serena stood silent for a few seconds after blurting out her confession. She seemed to realize she'd said too much. She straightened, smoothed her golden hair, and changed tone, trying to regain poise. I just thought, the house was too big for an older person, Mom. You're used to a small apartment. That mansion has too many stairs and it's far from the center. I worried you wouldn't adjust, so I cut in, not loud, but each word heavy enough to thicken the air. So you lived there in my place for 2 years? Serena pressed her lips together, eyes sliding away. I just stayed temporarily, to keep an eye on the house for you. Who knew it would be misunderstood like this? Andrew nearly lost control. He shot up, sharp in a way I'd rarely seen. Keep an eye on it? Serena, that's the house I bought for my mother. So she could feel secure in her later years, not stuck alone in that old, cramped apartment. Her heel clicked against the floor with a hard, dry sound as she stepped back. She wore a thin, paper-like smile. I know, but you said Mom likes her privacy. I was only doing what she wanted. My voice dropped. Privacy? Do you think privacy means isolation, lies, and having your home taken from you? Serena inhaled, trying to stay composed. Please don't misunderstand. I was afraid the move would be too tiring. So I told Andrew you didn't want to leave the old place. I remember you said you like your neighbors there, right? Andrew whipped toward her. Hold on. You told me Mom didn't like being visited, that she wanted to be alone, needed privacy. You said Mom asked not to be bothered because she was tired. I believed that for 2 years. The word believed caught in his throat. I could feel the hurt of a son robbed of the most sacred bond there is. I placed a hand on my chest to steady my breath. Suddenly everything clicked, like a puzzle I'd only seen in pieces. The calls Andrew said he was too busy to make, the Thanksgivings I waited alone, the postcards I sent that never got a reply. Turns out my son wasn't indifferent. Someone had built a wall between us made of sweet words, fake emails, and Mom said she doesn't want to see you. Andrew's voice was low but firm. You lied to me, didn't you? About everything? Serena bit her lip, face, still trying for coolness, but her eyes wavered. I don't think of it as lying. I just wanted things to run smoothly. I watched the conflict rise in her. Then, in the tension, she let out a line that chilled me. Because I could. Because no one questioned it. The room went dead quiet. Andrew stared, stunned. I felt the world stop. That one line, casual and arrogant, exposed who she really was. A woman who believed the greatest power is other people's indifference. Andrew shook his head, voice cracking. Do you realize what you've done? You stole 2 years of my life with my mother, years we can't get back. Serena tried to defend herself, eyes glassy. I didn't mean it. I just thought Mom would be happier not being bothered. You were busy, and I didn't want her to feel hurt that you had no time. I was trying to be kind. I let out a small laugh with no joy. Kind to who, Serena? To me or to yourself? She looked down and said nothing. Tears fell perfectly timed for sympathy. But I'm too old to be fooled by late tears. Andrew drew a breath and turned away. Pack your things and leave that mansion. As soon as the funeral is over, I don't want another excuse. Serena's eyes flew wide. She stepped closer, voice breaking. You can't say that. This is your father's funeral. People are outside. Don't make a scene. No, Serena. My voice was even and final. Precisely because this is my husband's funeral, I won't allow another lie in this place. She turned to me, trying to look fragile. Mom, please. Don't let Andrew lose face in front of the family. I stood, straightening my back, and spoke slowly. Today, the person losing face isn't Andrew. It's you because you chose deceit. Andrew sat, rubbing his temples. I saw both anger and shame in him. I was so foolish, he muttered. All this time I thought Mom didn't need me. I beat myself up for not being there. And it was you who orchestrated it. Serena sank into a chair, tears spilling. Don't say that. I was trying to keep the peace. Mom and we've never gotten along. I was afraid she'd wear you out. My voice softened but stayed cool. You know who was worn out? Not Andrew. Me. Worn out from believing my son had forgotten me. Worn out from thinking I no longer mattered to anyone. Silence stretched. I could hear rain begin to tap against the small window. I turned to Andrew and said gently, Son, it's time you check everything, the bank records, the mail, the messages you thought were from me. You may find more than you expect. He nodded, his eyes more resolute than ever. I will. I want to know how much of my life over the past 2 years was real. Serena reached for Andrew's hand, pleading, Honey, don't do this to me. We can talk later. Mom is too emotional, and so are you. I don't want us to say things that tear the whole family apart. Andrew pulled his hand back. Tear apart? You think it isn't already? You took my mother's trust and the bond in this family. What more do you want? I sat down, quietly watching, not interrupting. I knew any defense Serena made now would only expose her further. She wiped her tears and spoke softly. Honey, I just didn't think Mom would react so harshly. If she could accept that I only meant well, maybe Andrew cut in. Enough. My mother doesn't need you to decide what's good for her. Serena stood, inhaled, and put her cold mask back on. If you want to investigate, then investigate. I have nothing to hide. She said that, but I clearly saw her hands tremble. I turned to Andrew, my voice low but steady. Son, don't let this be forgotten. I don't want it to end with a fake apology. See it through, and let the truth speak for itself. He nodded, and placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt both like an apology and a promise. I turned to Serena with a slight smile. Serena, you can cry, you can play the misunderstood wife, but remember, tears don't wash away guilt when someone cries only to keep a mask on. Serena looked at me, anger flashing in her eyes, no longer contained. As for me, in that moment, I felt an odd calm. Maybe because I finally understood, this wasn't a family misunderstanding anymore. This was a fight to reclaim the truth. And this time, I would not step back. 3 days after the funeral, a light Florida rain fell. It was soft but persistent, as if it wanted to keep me in that old 4B apartment a little longer. I was making coffee when I heard a knock. When I opened the door, Andrew stood there soaked, holding a worn brown box. His face was tired, his beard unshaven, and his eyes red, but not from the rain. I brought this for you, he said hoarsely. It's what I found in the office at the mansion. I invited him in. We sat at the small dining table by the window, the spot where Michael used to read the paper every morning. The little room felt warm but empty. The dim light outside only managed to brush the faded wedding photo on the wall. Andrew set the box on the floor and opened it. Inside were a stack of envelopes, some files, and a black leather notebook. He bent down and pulled out the first envelope. I think you should see this first. I took it, a birthday card with a cream cover and a pink ribbon. The handwriting on the envelope was mine, from at least 3 years ago. To my beloved son, Mom. I opened it. Inside was a card that had never been unsealed, the flap still glued tight. My God, I whispered. You never received these cards, did you? Andrew shook his head, eyes down. Not a single one. There are cards from earlier years, too. I looked at the other envelopes in the box. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, all in my handwriting, sent to Andrew's friend. Office address. All unopened. I placed my hand on one of the cards, feeling like I was touching a stolen piece of memory. Each one represented a year I sat alone in this apartment, writing to my son with love, waiting for a phone call that never came. I thought you were mad at me, Andrew said quietly. Serena told me you didn't want contact. She even showed me emails you sent asking me not to bother you. I looked up. Emails? I don't even know how to send emails. I only write by hand. He nodded. I know, and I printed all of them. He pulled out another stack, printed emails showing my name as the sender. The tone read like someone distant. Andrew, I need time alone. Don't call me too much. I feel tired. My hands shook holding the page. No, Andrew, I never wrote these lines. He clenched his fists, the veins rising in his neck. I know. Now I know. But before, I believed it. Serena said you'd changed, forgetful, moody, for no reason. She said you needed space. It felt like someone had just drained the air from my lungs. It turns out every silence over the years had been arranged by someone else. I reached for the last item in the box, the black leather notebook. It was thick, heavy, and smelled like old leather. Andrew said softly, "I found it in Serena's desk drawer. Looks like a personal journal." I opened the first page. The neat, sharp handwriting was Serena's. The first line read, "Plan to maintain balance between both sides, Brenda and Andrew." I swallowed. Andrew sat beside me in silence. I turned a few more pages. Each page was meticulous, like an operator's logbook, not a wife's diary. "Call Brenda. Tell her Andrew is busy and won't stop by. Tell Andrew. Mom said don't call. She's tired. May 12th, Brenda sent a card. Keep it. Don't forward. We'll say it got lost." I shuddered. Each line was a small cut, executed with chilling precision. Andrew stared at the notebook, his lips tight. "Turn to the middle," he said. I opened to a page with a small paper clip. At the top, written in red ink, "Mother's Day." Below was a detailed note, "Morning. Send flowers to 4B from Andrew, keep the message short. Call Mom, say he's in a meeting and can't talk. Evening. Cook dinner at home. Tell him Mom said thanks and doesn't want to be bothered. Goal. Make Brenda feel remembered but without needing to meet." I set the notebook down. My vision blurred not from age, but from tears rising too fast. I remembered last Mother's Day, the bouquet of roses I received, the machine-printed card with Andrew's signature, and Serena's call saying he was on a business trip. I believed it. I sat alone all evening, watching the bouquet wither, yet felt warm, thinking my son was busy but still loved me, so even that love had been staged. Andrew was silent for a long time, then picked the notebook up again and flipped quickly. His hand trembled. "Mom," he said softly, "it's all here. Notes about the transfers, a whole plan to manage communication between you and me." I closed my eyes. A cold current ran down my spine. "You know," I said, my voice low, "all this time, I kept thinking it was my fault, that I was too sensitive, expected too much, too selfish to feel abandoned. But in truth, I was just a victim of scripted words." Andrew squeezed my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind." I shook my head. "No, Andrew, it isn't your fault. Serena knew how to make you believe. You're a good man, and that's exactly what made you easy to use." The room sank into silence. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming on the metal awning. I looked through the streaked window and felt both pain and a strange relief, because at last I knew the truth. No more what-ifs, no more doubting myself. Only the bare truth and a wound beginning to heal the only way it can, by facing it. Andrew pulled a few last sheets from the box. "Look at this." They were a series of utility bills in my name addressed to Coral Gables. "She used my name to register utilities," I said, voice trembling. "So when you checked, everything matched." "Right. Everything was legal to perfection." Andrew let out a bitter laugh. "She's smart, Mom. Too smart." I looked at the black notebook one last time. Between the slanted lines of ink, I saw 3 faint pencil lines almost erased. "Don't let them be together too long. Things break when they start telling the truth." To me, that was the final proof. Serena hadn't lied only out of greed. She lied to control, to turn me into a faded memory in my son's life, so she could take my place completely. I set the notebook down and spoke slowly. "Andrew, this isn't a small mistake. This is systematic manipulation. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding." He nodded, his eyes colder than before. "I won't let this be buried. I want to know what she did with the money, with the property, and with you." I gripped his hand, feeling the warmth of that trembling palm. "If you want to start with the money trail. That's where every lie leaves a mark." Andrew looked at me, a faint, sad but determined smile. "I understand. This time, you won't be alone." I nodded. Outside, the rain still fell, but the thick fog inside me after so many years finally lifted. I knew that from here, the fight to reclaim justice for my family was truly beginning. The next morning, I had just poured coffee when Andrew knocked. He looked like he hadn't slept much. The dark circles under his eyes were stark. He carried a thin folder, neatly arranged as if he'd spent the whole night sorting it. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I need you to see this." He set the folder on the table. Inside were a series of bank statements, lines of text, and steady amounts, $2,000 each month, for 3 years. "This is the money I sent you," Andrew said. "Every month, transferred through Serena's account. She said you didn't want to receive it directly, so I let her handle it." I looked at him, then at the numbers in front of me. Hundreds, then thousands, steady, month after month. In total, $36,000. A chill ran down my spine. I said softly, word by word, "I never received a single dollar of this." Andrew looked up, his face hardening. "That's impossible. She said you used it for Dad's medication and monthly expenses." I gave a small laugh that hurt all the way through. "Dad's medication? I had to sell my wedding ring to pay for it, Andrew, and your father's gold watch. If I had the money, would I have let him go 3 weeks without his meds? People say, you can lose money and earn it back, but trust once lost never returns the same." After hearing all this, I asked myself what hurts more, losing money or losing faith in someone you once considered family? What about you? What part of this story hurts you the most? Write me a few lines so we can reflect together on how to keep our dignity and kindness in a world full of lies. He fell silent. I could hear the wall clock ticking, one beat at a time. "Was Serena the middle person?" I asked, my voice tight. "She received the money for me, then told you I was fine, didn't she?" Andrew nodded without speaking. I took a deep breath and looked down at the papers. Those cold black lines now felt like cuts on the skin, steady, silent, stretching over 3 years without my knowledge. "Count them," I said quietly. 3 years, 36 months, 36 times she took the money without blinking. Andrew picked up a pen and counted each column. Every stroke was a stab to his heart. At the final number, his hand trembled. 36,000, he whispered, then let out a long, exhausted breath. She skimmed it all. I didn't answer. I just sat still, looking at the window where the rain had just stopped, weak light spilling in and reflecting on the table. I thought of the nights Michael coughed until he choked, how I propped his head on a worn pillow and counted the pills left in the bottle. I thought of dinners where I ate a single slice of dry bread, telling myself I wasn't hungry, just to save money for him. And somewhere else, Serena was living in a mansion, dining by candlelight in a silk dress, calling it a life she deserved. Andrew raked his hair, voice breaking. "Mom, I swear I didn't know. I was so foolish. She even told me not to send more because you said that amount was enough. Mom, I believed her." I put a hand on my son's shoulder. "Andrew, I know you had no ill intent, but now we have to be clear-headed. She didn't just take money. She took my time as a mother, and she stole your trust." He looked at me, eyes wet, but determined. "Mom, I'll get everything back. The money and our honor." I nodded gently. "No, Andrew, we'll clarify everything. Not for revenge, but for justice." He opened his laptop and kept checking. "Mom, here besides the $2,000 each month, there were small transfers, medical expenses, housekeeping services, all confirmed by Serena. She even used an email under your name to send payment confirmations." I closed my eyes briefly. "So she staged everything so perfectly that you had no reason to doubt." "Right," Andrew said, his voice dry. "She knows how to make everything look reasonable." I leaned back. a wave of fatigue washing over me. But this time, that fatigue wasn't helplessness. It was the storm front of a battle I was ready to face. "Andrew," I said more calmly, "we'll go to the mansion. As soon as possible. She built a whole world of lies, and it's time to face it." He looked up, a spark of resolve in his eyes. "I thought the same last night. I've contacted a lawyer. We know he'll advise us on the legal framework. If needed, we can go to the police or file a civil case." I nodded. "Good. But before we confront her, we prepare. No arguing, no letting her steer the conversation. Just ask the right questions, take the right facts." I pulled out a blank sheet and wrote the first lines. List to verify. 1. Bank statements for the last 3 years. 2. Mail, emails, texts, cross-check each contact as 3. Utility bills registered in my name at the Coral Gables mansion. 4. Door codes and property insurance. I paused and looked up at Andrew. "You handle the banking first. I'll call Aunt Lillian. She can confirm a few details. We need evidence, not emotions." Andrew nodded. "I understand. But Mom," his voice caught, "how can you bear knowing all of this?" I looked out the window. Sun after rain began to glint, gold reflecting off the foggy glass. "I've endured 3 years of loneliness, Andrew. Now, knowing the truth doesn't weaken me, it makes me clearer." He was silent, as if carving my words into himself. "Tomorrow," I continued, "we go to the mansion. No notice. I want to look her in the eye when I say the first sentence." Andrew looked up. "What's the first sentence, Mom?" I smiled faintly, though my heart was still scraped raw. "It's, Serena, do you know every dollar you took was paid for with someone else's pain?" He nodded and held my hand. "Mom, I promise I won't leave you alone again. I owe you that." I looked at my son, and for the first time in years, I saw not only love in his eyes but awakening the one thing every mother hopes for in her child, no matter the cost it takes to get there. That afternoon, after Andrew left, I sat alone, opened the small notebook on the table, and wrote on a fresh page. "No one can lie forever. One day the truth will find its way to speak." I set down the pen and closed the notebook. Inside, the pain began to settle, making space for something else: agency, strength, and clarity. I have lost too much: money, time, hugs, phone calls. But what Serena cannot take is my ability to rise. Tomorrow, I will walk into that mansion not as a deceived mother, but as a woman who will claim justice for herself. That morning, Florida sunlight poured gold across the roads of Coral Gables, a neighborhood I'd only seen in pictures. Tall palms leaned over stone walkways, white mansions with red tile roofs stretched in a line, elegant to the point of cold. Andrew's car slowed as we turned onto the last street. I looked through the window and my heart sank. In front of us was the mansion where I should have lived for the past 2 years. 2 stories, white walls, Spanish tiles, a balcony draped in bright bougainvillea. A wrought iron gate opened onto a marble courtyard with a small fountain and an angel statue at the center. Every detail was perfect, like it had been cut from an architecture magazine. Andrew eased to the curb and drew a breath. "Ready, Mom?" I nodded. "I've been ready since the day she started lying." He stepped out and pulled a key. When the lock turned, the dry click sounded like an opening line to a truth that couldn't be taken back. The front door swung open. Expensive perfume and vanilla candle mingled with cool air conditioning. On the marble floor, the click of high heels rang out quick, then stopping at the top of the stairs. Serena appeared. She wore a cream silk dress, hair perfectly curled, bare feet but still carrying the regal posture of a true owner. When she saw us, her face twitched, but within a second, she had her poise back. "Andrew," she said sweetly, "you're back? I didn't expect you to bring Mom without letting me know." Andrew didn't answer. He stepped in, eyes like steel. "This is my mother's home, no notice needed," Serena pressed, her lips, shoulders lifting slightly. "This house is in your name. I'm your legal wife, so I have the right to live here. If Mom feels uncomfortable, I'm happy to give her a tour." I drew a breath, keeping my voice even. A tour? No one needs a tour of the place she should have lived in for 2 years. Her smile stalled. Andrew pulled the black notebook from his pocket. The moment she saw it, her face went pale. He set it on the stone counter, thud, a heavy sound dropping into the silence. "You recognize this?" he asked, low and slow. Serena stepped back, lips trembling. "That's my journal. You violated my privacy," Andrew answered flatly. "Not a journal. A record of wrongdoing." She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, I stepped forward. "Serena, do you know the things I demand in life aren't mansions, cars, or a name to flaunt? I only want what you took, the smallest things. A birthday card, a dinner with my son, and money for card. My husband's medicine, when he was dying. That's all." Serena stood still. The fake strength on her face cracked like paint under harsh sun. Andrew looked at his wife, his eyes more disappointed than angry. "Why, Serena? Why would you do this to my mother?" She turned away, voice trembling but still playing fragile. "You don't understand. Mom never truly accepted me. She always saw me as an outsider. I just wanted a place." "By stealing?" I asked softly. "By inventing stories, dividing mother and son, then living in a home bought with love and trust." She snapped back, voice rising. "Because she was always between us. You always talked about her cooking, about how she worried about you." I was tired of living in that shadow. Andrew froze, as if slapped. "So that's it? You were jealous of my mother?" Serena panted, then shouted, "Yes! Because you love her more than you love me." The room seemed to shatter under that line. I stood still. Every secret, every move, every scheme now gathered under one bare reason: petty, selfish jealousy. Andrew stepped back, his eyes hollow. "You destroyed your marriage over that?" Serena clutched her chest, tears falling, but I recognized them not as remorse, but as the fear of losing power. I touched the cold stone counter, letting the chill steady me, reminding myself to keep breathing, keep calm, keep the evidence. "Andrew," I said slowly, "let her speak it all. Let her own words indict her." He nodded, staring at Serena. "You took the money, faked messages, kept me from my mother. What else do you have to say?" Serena wiped her tears, her voice fraying. "You think it's easy being your wife? You're always busy, always talking about work, and when you're not, it's about your mother. I just wanted to be loved." I sighed. "Serena, love doesn't mean taking. You didn't want love, you wanted control." She turned on me, eyes full of resentment. "What do you know about marriage? Have you ever had to fight for someone's love?" I smiled lightly, though the scar inside me had long since closed. "No, because I never had to fight for it. I only had to be worthy of it." Serena bit her lip, shoulders trembling. She looked around the white walls, the crystal chandelier, the polished stone floor, as if everything was turning its back on her. Andrew stepped forward, his voice cold and final. "Serena, you need to leave the house now. This is no longer your place." She widened her eyes, trying to regain her old hauteur. "You don't have the right to throw me out. I'm your legal wife, and this house is in your name. If I want, I can stay as long as I please." "Right," Andrew replied, "but not after you're sued for financial fraud and identity forgery." That sentence made Serena turn pale. She looked at me, as if seeking a little pity, but I only met her gaze with calm eyes. "Serena," I said slowly, "when you took this house, you thought you'd won. but there are things you can't take: the truth, a mother and son's bond, and trust. Those things, no matter how many signatures you forge, can't be faked." She turned away, gripping the stair railing, her voice almost a scream. "You think you're better than me? Fine, but this isn't over. I won't let you take everything from me." Andrew answered shortly, his voice like steel. "No, Serena. You're the one who took everything, and now you're only losing what never belonged to you." She looked at him one last time, her eyes filled with both hatred and despair. Then, without another word, Serena turned and walked up the stairs. The echo of her heels rang through the empty house, slow and heavy, like bells tolling for a crumbling illusion. Andrew sighed and dropped into a chair. I went to my son and set my hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Andrew. Sometimes to get peace back you have to dare, to let everything collapse." He nodded slightly, his eyes still fixed on the staircase. "Mom, I don't understand how I ever loved someone who could be that cold." I looked at him and said softly, "Because you have a heart that trusts. Don't let her take that from you." Outside, the late afternoon sun cut through the window, pouring a warm strip of light across the marble floor. I stood still, taking in the house my house, and knew that, from today on, I was no longer the deceived one. Even if Serena swore, "This isn't over," I understood with the truth exposed, this was the beginning of the end for her. After the confrontation in Coral Gables, Serena vanished from our sight as if she'd never existed. She didn't pack, didn't leave, she simply barricaded herself in the mansion, locking doors, pulling curtains, ignoring calls. Andrew tried calling dozens of times. Each time, the cold sound of voicemail played, a wall between the truth and cowardice. 3 days passed. The lights still burned at night, but no one went in or out. Andrew contacted the attorney, and I returned to the old 4B apartment, keeping myself busy so I wouldn't be swallowed by emotion. On the fourth morning, just as I finished brewing coffee, the phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated a few seconds, then picked up. "Mrs. Cole?" A middle-aged woman's voice, a bit husky, slightly urgent. "I'm Rosa Alvarez. I work for a few families in Coral Gables, and I think you should know this." I tensed slightly. "What is it, Miss Rosa?" She drew a long breath. "It's about Mrs. Serena." At that name, my hand tightened around the receiver. "Go on." "Mrs. Serena," Rosa continued, "has lived in our neighborhood for nearly 2 years. Everyone thinks she's a widow. She told people her husband, a businessman named Andrew, died of late-stage cancer. She said the mansion was an inheritance. He left her before he passed." I froze, my heart twisting. "You're saying she told them her husband was dead?" "Yes, she accepted condolence flowers, held a memorial, even put a framed photo of a man on the mantel, said he was her late husband. I remember clearly, she wore a black dress with a shawl, accepting sympathy while smiling softly, saying, 'Time will help me move on.'" I shot to my feet. My lips trembled. "My God," Rosa continued, her voice tinged with outrage. "And that's not all. 2 weeks ago, she hired me to get the house ready for a party. I heard her boast that she was preparing to leave the U.S. for Europe to start a new life. She said, 'I need to escape these painful memories.' I actually felt sorry for her then. I leaned against the table, breathing deep like someone hit by a wave. "Rosa, are you sure? Do you have proof?" "I do," Rosa answered immediately. "I have photos from the party. She even hung a fake wedding photo. The man isn't Andrew. It looks like someone pulled from a magazine. And the worst part, she's listing the mansion for sale." I was stunned. "Listing it?" "Yes," Rosa said firmly. "She told some neighbors she wanted a quick sale because the house brings back too many memories. I heard the names of 2 families who already made offers, even sent written proposals. Mrs. Serena said she'd close soon and move to Europe to open a small fashion boutique. I slumped into a chair. My hands shook, clutching the receiver like it was a thin lifeline between reality and a bad dream. She hadn't just lied to my family, she'd deceived an entire community, casting herself as the lead in a perfectly staged tragedy. Rosa's voice softened with sympathy. "I know you're Mr. Andrew's mother. Everyone here liked Mrs. Serena, so I thought you should know the truth. I didn't want anyone else to be fooled." I choked up. "Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for calling." I hung up and sat for a long time. Images flashed one after another, Serena standing before a mirror, acting the widow, taking condolence flowers, listing a house that wasn't hers. I had never seen such calculated deceit. That afternoon, Andrew came by. I told him everything. He listened, his face darkening by the minute. When I mentioned Serena listing the mansion, Andrew clenched his fist and ground out each word. "She's crossed the line." I nodded, my voice hoarse. "Andrew, do you see? She didn't just deceive me, she deceived the entire neighborhood. She built a world where you were dead." Andrew was silent for a long time. I saw his shoulders tremble. Then he spoke, choked but resolute. "Mom, it's time to make it public." I looked at him, waiting. "I'm going to tell everyone the truth. Family, neighbors, the people who believed her," he said. "I'll change the locks on the mansion, as the rightful owner. And I want you there, to tell your part. She's hidden, manipulated, and lied for 2 years. Now she'll hear the truth not within 4 walls, but in front of everyone." I drew a deep breath. "Do you think people will believe it?" He looked at me, eyes steady. "The truth doesn't need belief to exist, Mom. It only needs to be spoken." In him, I saw Michael calm, principled, never backing down in the face of injustice. That evening, we planned the details. Andrew called the attorney to confirm legal ownership of the mansion, then scheduled a lock change for the next morning. He emailed all the relatives and a few close neighbors in Coral Gables, inviting them to a family gathering over the weekend. "I intend to turn it into a public unveiling of the truth," he said. "The more open it is, the harder it is for her to slither away." I nodded, then opened my notebook and wrote a few lines, not long, just the essentials I needed to say. I didn't come for revenge. I came to reclaim dignity for myself, for my husband, and for the mother-son bond that was nearly destroyed. I added a few lines. "No theatrics, just the truth. Keep calm, keep eye contact." Andrew smiled at me. "You're preparing like someone about to take the stand." I answered, quiet but firm. "Every truth needs witnesses, son. And this time, I won't let anyone rewrite my story." The room fell into silence, broken only by the ticking clock. I felt like I was standing on the threshold between past and present on one side, the long years of deception. On the other, the glare of light, harsh and stinging. Andrew sat across from me, taking my hand. "Mom, when this is over, I want you to move in with me. Not out of pity, but because I want it." I squeezed his hand lightly. "I'll think about it, but right now, we have work to do." When Andrew left, I looked out the window. The sunset reddened the whole sky, reflecting off the old buildings. Part of me felt tired, another part felt a strange vitality returning. I knew what lay ahead wouldn't be easy. Serena would react, maybe scheme, maybe play the victim. But this time I had the truth, the evidence, witnesses, and Rosa Alvarez, a woman brave enough to call me simply because she felt justice should be served. I told myself, sometimes the truth doesn't come from the ones we love, but from strangers brave enough to say what's right. That night, I rewrote my short speech for the upcoming gathering. No flowery words, no blame, just the final line I wanted everyone to hear. When a woman is stripped of her voice, she doesn't disappear, She waits for the day to speak again, with her whole heart and with evidence. I set down my pen and closed my eyes. The fear was gone. I simply saw clearly this was the moment I took my life back. On Saturday evening, Coral Gables glowed under golden lights streaming through the tall palms. The air was mild, but inside me rose a feeling both eager and tight. The front yard of the mansion, once a symbol of deceit, was now filled with people. Andrew's relatives, a few close colleagues, neighbors from around the block, and Rosa Alvarez were all there. Everyone stood quietly, eyes fixed on what was about to happen. The porch lights came on. Andrew stood in the middle of the yard, holding a thick folder. I stood beside him in a simple, dark dress. In front of us, Serena appeared, dragging 2 suitcases, her face taut but still trying to project poise. She wore a white dress, perhaps to look innocent, but her stiff face and heavy makeup couldn't hide her restless eyes. "Are you trying to turn this into a farce?" Andrew's voice was low but carried clearly. "I invited you here to talk, not to put on another performance." Serena set down the suitcases, crossed her arms, and tried to keep her tone even. "What do you want?" "I just want to leave quietly." "No need to blow this up in front of everyone." Andrew shook his head. "No, Serena, these people have the right to know. Because for 2 years, you lied to them." Murmurs spread. I heard whispers. "What's going on?" "That's Andrew's wife," she said. "Her husband died of cancer, didn't she?" Andrew opened the folder and pulled out a few pages, speaking clearly and methodically, like a carefully prepared indictment. "Serena Cole, my legal wife, told people I died of cancer. She accepted condolence flowers, held a memorial, and listed this mansion as inherited property. Here is the title: this house is in my name. She has no right to sell, transfer, or occupy it unilaterally." The buzz rippled like a wave. A few jaws dropped. Mrs. Martinez, a kindly older neighbor, stepped forward, her face stunned. "Good Lord, Serena, I brought you food to comfort you." "You said your husband died of cancer. I cried with you." Serena flinched, her shoulders trembling, but forced a crooked smile. Everyone misunderstood. I was joking." Andrew cut in, icy. "No one. Jokes by accepting funeral flowers and hanging a dead man's photo." "Serena." The air thickened. I could hear the wind threading through the palms, dry and cool. Andrew turned to me and nodded. "Mom, your turn." I stepped forward. The yard went silent. I looked around, faces both familiar and new, people who had believed Serena was a grieving widow. I spoke slowly but firmly. "I am Brenda Cole, Andrew's mother. For 4 years, I lived alone in a small apartment in Davie. I didn't receive a single card, phone call, or check-in from my son because Serena blocked them all." A few people sighed. I continued. "When my husband Michael was dying, I couldn't afford his medication. I sold my wedding ring. Meanwhile, Serena took the money. Andrew sent me. Lied that I didn't want to see anyone, that I was difficult, that I had lost my mind." I paused to steady my breath, then looked straight at Serena. "You said I needed privacy. In truth, you wanted me to second, disappear so no one could verify your words." The crowd murmured. I saw phones rise, lights flickering as people recorded, but I didn't care. Serena suddenly screamed, "You're humiliating me." "This is a family matter, not a trial." Andrew answered, calm but unyielding, "The truth doesn't humiliate anyone except the liar." The line cut like a blade. Serena's face went chalky, her eyes darting, searching for a sympathetic gaze in the crowd. But no one looked at her with pity anymore. Andrew raised the folder again. "Here are the bank statements from the last 3 years. Each month, $2,000 was sent to my mother through Serena's account. She kept all of it. A total of $36,000. And here are printed emails where Serena impersonated my mother to confirm receipt." Everything has been forwarded to our attorney. Sighs, murmurs, then silence. Some people shook their heads. Others looked at Serena with a mix of anger and pity. I turned to Andrew, resting my hand on his arm. My son isn't perfect. He believed the wrong person, but he's brave enough to admit it and strong enough to make it right. Andrew looked at me, eyes glassy, then pulled out a bright silver key ring. He turned back to the crowd, his voice clear. These are the keys to this house. They should have been my mother's 2 years ago. Today, I'm giving them back, not just the keys to a mansion, but to the trust I unintentionally lost. He placed the keys in my hand. When the metal touched my skin, my hand trembled not from fear, but from warmth, something I'd lost through years of forced isolation. Serena sneered, bitter. Fine. You win. But remember this, Andrew. I'm still your legal wife. You can't just kick me out of your life that easily. Andrew sighed, his voice steady but colder than ever. No one's kicking you out, Serena. You left on your own the day you chose lies over real love. Serena clenched, the suitcase handles, her eyes blazing. You'll regret this. I answered softly but clear. No, Serena. Regret belongs to those who won't face the truth. She spun around, dragging the suitcase across the tiles, and strode to the gate. The clatter of wheels over the steps echoed into the night like the ending of an old chapter. No one stopped her. Only the wind moved, carrying the whispers of those watching. Andrew stood still for a while, then turned to me. Mom, I'm sorry. I smiled and squeezed the keys. You don't need to be sorry. What matters is you chose the right side. He nodded slightly, tears shining under the porch lights. Around us, a few neighbors came closer, light touches on my shoulder, quiet words. You're so strong. I can't believe Serena did that. You deserve to live here. I thanked each of them, then looked around the yard. This place had once been a stage for lies, and tonight it was a courtroom of conscience. No judge, no jury, only the truth, standing tall, burning bright in the Florida night. As people drifted away, Andrew came over and said softly, I want you to move in tomorrow. This house needs a good person living in it. I nodded, my eyes stinging. Tomorrow I'll come home. I looked up at the sky. The stars were scattered thick, simple, honest light. In my hand, the keys were still warm. Not because of the metal, but because of the mother-son bond buried for years under misunderstanding, now lit again by the truth. And I understood. Every lie eventually has its day in public, like tonight. The first night I stayed at the Coral Gables mansion, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but because the quiet was so unfamiliar it unsettled me. I lay in the large bedroom, high ceiling, white curtains, a comforter scented with lavender. Everything was perfect to the point of foreign. Only the faint murmur of the fountain outside drifted in, steady like a heart finding its rhythm. After a long illness, I tossed and turned, thinking of the years-lost days isolated in the 4B apartment, living on neighbors' kindness, believing my son was too busy to call. Now I lay in the home that should have been mine long ago, but I had to weather a storm to step into it. Sleep came late and fitful, like a shy guest knocking and leaving before dawn. In the morning, sunlight poured through the big window, laying across the polished floor. I got up and threw open the windows. Birds sang as the smell of fresh coffee filled the wide kitchen. It had been a long time since I'd heard the sound of peace. In the first days, I walked loops around the house, relearning how to use a space. I ran my hand along the granite counters, opened the cupboards, and organized each plate. The kitchen was so large, I needed 3 laps to remember where everything went. The reading room next door had shelves up to the ceiling, and the porch looked out over blazing roses. Every afternoon, I sat. there where Serena had hosted flaunting tea parties to read, listen to the wind through the trees, and let my heart settle. Andrew visited me 3 times a week. At first, he was awkward, always trying to make up for it in every way, bringing food, fixing the dishwasher even when it wasn't broken, buying flowers, even gifting a pricey espresso machine. I understood that was his way of atonement, but I only smiled. "You don't have to buy me anything," I said. "What I need is your time." After a few weeks, the awkwardness faded. We found our natural family rhythm again, the very thing Serena had tried to steal. Every Sunday, Andrew came for lunch. I cooked the dishes my husband loved: empanadas, paella, and sometimes that old-fashioned stew. Andrew said, "Smells like childhood coming back." The once cold kitchen filled with laughter. Andrew chopped onions while talking about work. I tasted the sauce and scolded him playfully. "My son still doesn't know how to cut onions?" He laughed, warm as the years before lies ever crept in. After each meal, I washed dishes while Andrew sat on the porch, listening to the radio or reading the news. That simple scene was worth more to me than any property. Time passed, and the house began to breathe like a real home. I put in fresh flowers each week, rehung Michael's photo in the living room, and set an old armchair by the window. At night, I lit orange-scented candles and put on soft jazz. Everything in the house began to breathe, and so did I. One day, while trimming roses in the garden, Rosa Alvarez, the woman who had called me, stopped by. She brought a tray of flan and a bag of mint seeds. "I thought you might like to plant these," she said. I smiled and accepted, my heart full of gratitude. If she hadn't called that day, I might still be lost in the dark. We became friends. Rosa taught me how to prune. I taught her to make empanadas. Soon after, I signed up for a gardening class at the Coral Gables Community Center. Every Tuesday morning, I carried my basket there, with women my age or older, sharing about plants, soil, and pieces of our lives. I planted roses, herbs, and vegetables, things I thought I no longer had the strength to start again. Strangely, with my hands in the dirt, my heart grew calm. Maybe healing begins when you dare to touch life with your own hands. In the 3rd month, I hosted a small book club at home. 4 women came, each hurt in her own way. One estranged from her son, one left penniless after divorce, one thrown out by her daughter-in-law. We didn't cry much. We read, drank tea, and shared a little at a time. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. One late afternoon, I saw myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman there. My face no longer carried such heaviness. My brow was less tense. The corners of my mouth softened. The wary look was gone from my eyes, replaced by quiet. I smiled not to hide pain, but as someone who had survived a storm. Andrew still came regularly, but something felt different. He started talking about a woman named Danielle Moore, a nurse at a clinic he funded. As he spoke, I saw a light in his eyes, the light of a man opening his heart after being hurt. One Sunday afternoon, Andrew brought Danielle over. I remember it was drizzling, the smell of damp earth blending with fresh coffee. Danielle stepped inside with a bouquet of white daisies. She smiled, gentle. "I've heard so much about you from Andrew. Today, I'd like to be sous chef, not a guest." I smiled back, taking in her neatly tied brown hair, bright eyes, and simple warmth. Unlike Serena, Danielle didn't try to impress. She was natural, polite, and most of all, she knew how to listen. When I spoke, she set her phone down, looked me in the eye, and nodded lightly. It felt like, for the first time in years, a young person truly heard me. That meal was joyful. Danielle rolled empanada dough with her sleeves up, laughing when flour smudged her cheek. Andrew teased her. She pretended to pout, and they both burst out laughing. That laughter filled the house, the kind of sound I thought would never return. When Danielle left, she took the gardening gloves I'd given her and promised to bring a few small potted plants next time. I stood on the porch watching them go, seeing Andrew hold her hand, his eyes gentle and trusting. For the first time, I didn't feel anxious about my son loving someone new. I felt grateful. That night, I sat down with the notebook I'd kept since my husband passed. I wrote, "Healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from looking straight at the truth and letting time do its work. Community is medicine. When we dare to share our stories, pain stops being a burden and becomes a bridge." I set the pen down and closed the notebook. Outside, the fountain kept running, the water falling steady like the heartbeat of the pen. House and my new heartbeat, too. I understood that the past 6 months weren't just a journey to reclaim a house, but a journey to reclaim myself. The woman once labeled senile, difficult, old, and weak now had a voice, a home, her son's love, and a small community around her. I looked up at Michael's photo on the wall and whispered, "Everything's okay now, dear. I'm truly home." And in that moment, I knew I had come back to life. 6 months after that outdoor trial, my life and Andrew's slowly settled. But one chapter wasn't closed yet, the chapter called Justice. One April morning, while I was tending rosemary on the porch, Andrew walked into the yard holding a thick file. His face was calm, but there was a heaviness in his eyes. "The attorney wants to see you this afternoon," he said. "There are a few things to sign and some new findings." I wiped my hands on my apron and nodded. "All right, tell me. What's still unclear?" Andrew sat and opened the file. "We've submitted all the evidence. Serena's black notebook, the emails impersonating you, the listing documents for the mansion, and the bank transfer statements. But the attorney found something else." I stayed quiet, waiting. "Serena opened 2 credit accounts in my name," Andrew said slowly. "She used my personal information, social security, office address, even an electronic signature to take out consumer credit. In total, more than $80,000. I froze. "My goodness, I didn't know," Andrew said, voice dropping. "She did it very cleverly. All the paperwork looked legitimate. When I checked my credit, it finally showed up." He opened his laptop and showed me. Authorized user, Serena Cole, was right there. Along with the spending history, jewelry, travel, a VIP spa membership, even a beauty course in Paris. Looking at those cold numbers, I felt both hurt and tired. Serena had gone far beyond any limit, not just lying about love, but abusing the law and our finances. That afternoon, we went to the attorney's office. Thomas Bennett, a silver-haired man with a steady voice, stood to greet us and invited us to sit. "Mrs. Cole, Andrew," he said, "I've reviewed everything. The bank confirms identity fraud occurred. However, since Andrew signed a marriage record, part of the assets is still considered marital property. Serena will be liable unless she can prove lawful consent." He slid another packet toward us. "Serena's counsel just sent a divorce settlement proposal. She's willing to accept full wrongdoing in exchange for not being criminally prosecuted. If Andrew signs, it stays in civil court and won't go to criminal court." I looked at my son. He didn't speak, just stared at the wooden table, fingers interlaced. "What do you think?" I asked softly. He looked up, eyes sunken. "I don't want to see her in prison, Mom. I just want a clean break for everything to end." I nodded slightly. "Sometimes forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, but because we need peace." The attorney smiled, eyes kind. "I believe that's a sound choice. Her social and financial consequences are already substantial." It was true. After the public reveal at the mansion, Serena's reputation collapsed. Her family, once well-to-do in Palm Beach, cut ties. They quietly sold the condo she had lived in and moved away. I heard Serena rented a small studio on the outskirts of Miami, avoiding people she knew. I felt no joy. There's nothing to gloat about when someone drives herself over a cliff. I only felt a vague weight lift the guilty fog I'd carried for years, thinking I was the mother who broke a family. Justice arrived not with cheers, but with a door softly closing. A few weeks later, the divorce settlement was officially signed. Serena relinquished all property claims, including any share of the Coral Gables mansion. The court recorded, "The house would be for my lifetime use, exactly as Andrew intended when he bought it." When I received the documents, I held them tightly not for their material value, but for the clarity they represented something twisted for far too long. After that, I set new rules for myself and our family. Rule 1. Financial transparency. I manage my accounts independently, keep clear records of every expense, and I taught Andrew to do the same. Never let blind love cloud your judgment, I told him. Real love isn't afraid of transparency. Rule 2. Firm boundaries. I cherish Danielle, the new woman in Andrew's life, but I also keep respectful space. Danielle understands and responds with grace. She always calls before visiting, always asks my opinion about arranging the living room, and never brings up Serena. I know that kind of tact usually comes from someone who's been hurt before. Andrew changed too. He no longer looks for perfect, but for honesty and kindness. He often tells me, "Mom, I don't need someone who makes me feel awe. I just need someone who makes me feel at ease." I smile. You've learned what took me a lifetime to understand. In the afternoons when Florida light slants through the windows, I often sit in the reading room and turn old pages. I don't strike out the memories of Serena because I don't want to forget. I keep them as a reminder. Lies can be gilded, but they always peel under the light. One evening, I sat at Michael's old wooden desk and rewrote my will. Not long, just a few pages. I wrote in the calmest voice, with no bitterness, only clarity. My estate will be distributed by the measure of one's character, not by blood. Whoever lives with honesty will inherit. No one may hold title to or use my finances without my written consent. The Coral Gables home will be used as a community space where older women can learn financial skills and share their stories. I signed and closed the folder. Relief moved through me like a cool breeze. Since then, peaceful days arrived slowly but surely. In the mornings, I tend the garden, read the paper, and sometimes call Rosa to check in. In the afternoons, my book group and I discuss new reads and how to keep a steady heart when life isn't steady. Every so often, Andrew and Danielle stop by with wine and laughter. None of us mention Serena anymore. We don't need to. She's only a name in the past now, no rage, no grudge, just an expensive lesson about truth and trust. One late summer evening, I sat on the porch watching sunset turn the trees red. The last light glittered on the fountain, the same sound that once kept me awake, now lulling me gently. I murmured, half to Michael and half to myself, "We went through the storm and kept our dignity. That's enough." Then I smiled the smile of someone finished with the past and convinced that justice, even late, still arrives on time. On Monday morning, while I was watering roses out front, an old silver car stopped at the gate. The engine sounded rough and tired, as if it had traveled too many weary roads. I squinted in the sun, and my heart dipped when I saw who stepped out. Serena. I knew her at once, though it took a few seconds to believe my eyes. Hair once perfectly styled now hung messy, half dyed in two tones, a wrinkled blouse, worn jeans, heels with scuffed tips. No trace of the woman who used to sweep in wearing expensive perfume and a cold smile. She stood there in the Florida glare, clutching a small purse, eyes hollow and desperate. "Mrs. Brenda." Her voice was hoarse, like she'd cried all night. "I just want to explain and to apologize." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Water from the can trickled over the rose roots. The sound on the leaves was steady, calm, the opposite of the chaos in the woman's eyes. Finally, I spoke, light but firm. "You can talk, but only for a few minutes. I don't have much time left for old stories." Serena nodded and stepped up to the fence. She didn't cross the gate. Maybe she understood that boundary wasn't just iron, but the last bit of dignity for us both. "I know I have no standing," she said, eyes down. "I've lost everything: work, family, reputation. I just want you to know, I really did love Andrew. I was wrong because I was afraid of losing him. I thought if I controlled everything, I'd be loved more." I looked at her for a long moment. In that instant, I didn't see the schemer who had once wrecked my family. I saw a lost soul standing in the rubble she created. I answered softly, my voice steady as if speaking to myself. "Serena, no words can return the time I lost with my son. The missed birthdays, the ceremonies I sat through alone, the nights I believed I was a burden. But I hope you learn one thing. Real love doesn't require controlling anyone, and remorse only matters when it comes with responsibility." Serena lifted her wet eyes. "Do you think I still have a chance to start over?" I gently shook my head, not to deny it, but to release the question. "A chance isn't something others give you, Serena. It lies in how you live from today on." I stepped back and touched the gate. "You should go now. I wish you peace, but there's no place for you in my life anymore." She pressed her lips together, shoulders trembling, then gave a small nod. "Thank you, even though you didn't have to." She turned and walked to the car. The door thudded shut like a final period. As the silver car rolled off the stone road, I watched without anger, only with a healthy finality, the last boundary between forgiveness and repetition. I drew a deep breath. The scent of roses and mint filled the air. The weight I'd carried dissolved like morning fog. At noon, Rosa called. "Mrs. Brenda." Her voice was bright. "I just heard from neighbors your garden was picked as Garden of the Month. Everyone's happy you're our new neighbor." I laughed a real light laugh. "Thank you, Rosa. Maybe this neighborhood needed a bit of my old-fashioned touch." "No," she said, "you brought back something people forgot: feeling safe." After the call, I went back to watering. In the sun, the rose petals trembled, reflecting light like hundreds of tiny crystals. I realized I no longer watered to hide from loneliness. Now I watered to nourish life, both the garden's and my own. In the afternoon, I biked around the neighborhood. It had been ages since I felt it. The wind in my hair, the smooth roll of tires over stone. A few neighbors waved. Some kids shouted, "Hi, Miss Brenda." I smiled back, and my heart felt strangely warm. That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote a few lines. No longer pages of tears and fury, just small notes of simple joy. Today, the roses bloomed round as smiles. "I made the risotto, Michael." Loved It's Still Good, even for one. Andrew and Danielle promised to take me to the beach this weekend. I also tried things I'd postponed for decades, signing up for an oil painting class, a baking course at the community center, and morning walks to the nearby park. Sometimes I wondered, if Serena had never come, would I have learned to live honestly with myself like this? A question with no answer and none needed. What matters is I learned how to move on. One night, moonlight washed the garden as I sat on the porch, watching the fountains sparkle. I remembered the early days when that sound kept me awake, stirring emptiness. Now it lulls me to sleep. I murmured, as if talking to myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer letting the past steer you. because forgiveness isn't a gift for someone else, it's a gift I give myself, to live lightly, calmly, and free of old shadows. As I wrote that, I closed the notebook and looked toward the window where the breeze carried the scent of jasmine. I smiled. I'm no longer the trembling woman at that funeral, nor the victim in the little 4B apartment. I am Brenda Cole, the woman who passed through loss, lies, and loneliness, and finally took charge of her own story. And if anyone asks me what justice is, I'll say, justice isn't only the sentence for the guilty, it's the moment the hurt person gets her voice back calm, clear, and without needing to shout. I stood, set down the watering can, and gently brushed a newly opened rose. That red no longer reminded me of blood or anger. It was simply the color of life, the life I reclaimed with my whole heart, with courage, and with forgiveness I don't regret. That afternoon, the Coral Gables sky looked gilded. Sunset spread over the pool like rippling old coins. Saffron from the kitchen drifted across the porch, warm and bright, calling back the memory of peaceful days long gone. I was stirring paella in the round iron pan that had been with Michael and me for more than 20 years. It was his favorite, a dish I still make on special days, as my way of saying the good things never really disappear. A car pulled up. Andrew and Danielle stepped out with 2 bottles of wine and a bouquet of lavender. "Mom, the weather's perfect today," Andrew said, the sunlight on his face making me remember the boy who used to run around the yard begging for a taste of undercooked paella. Danielle helped set the table. She laid the cloth, placed the plates, and smiled when she saw my old pan. "Is this the legendary pan Andrew told me about?" I nodded, spooning out the golden rice. "It's seen more than dinners, tears, and laughter, too. Today, it deserves only joy." We sat on the porch, late light washing the wooden table. A breeze moved through the palms, carrying jasmine and the neighbors' laughter across the street. Andrew poured the wine. "Mom, I want you to tell us more about Dad tonight." Danielle's never heard the full story. I smiled. Michael was a man of few words who always made people feel seen. He wasn't rich, but he was rich in mercy. Maybe what I'm most grateful for is that he didn't have to watch the lies that came later. He left with his honor intact. Danielle was quiet, resting her hand on Andrew's shoulder. "I believe he's proud of you both." I looked at the two of them, my heart full. This house, once the source of pain, was full of laughter again. The soft clink of glasses echoed in the sun-drenched yard. Over dinner, we talked about small plans. Andrew's new branch opening, Danielle's idea for a community health clinic for seniors, and me, I just wanted to plant more flowers, read a few more books, and learn to live a little slower. As the sky turned lilac, I watched the pool catch the last light and felt a quiet peace rise in me. I understood this is what people mean by healing, not loud, not declared, just a full, gentle silence after too much turmoil. I gathered my life's lessons and said softly, as if to the breeze, "Don't let anyone make you doubt your worth. Real love doesn't turn into tally marks. Loving your child doesn't mean subtracting yourself." Andrew nodded in silence, his eyes warm as a fire. Danielle gave my hand a gentle squeeze and smiled. I looked down at the house keys on the table, the little metal shining in the sunset. To others, they're small and ordinary. To me, they're the symbol of dignity and freedom restored. I knew I didn't need to prove anything else. I only needed to live true and let this home ring with the voices of decent people. That was enough. When dinner ended, Andrew helped me clear the table. Danielle washed dishes while I watched the sky shift from orange to violet to black. The day closed softly, no tears, just laughter woven with the wind through the palms. Tomorrow, I'll plant another bed of white roses right by the fountain. Not to memorialize anyone, but to thank life for giving me a chance to begin again, even late. I lifted my eyes to the night sky and told myself, the sun sets only to promise another dawn. Thank you for listening to my story to the very end. If you've lived through days of being misunderstood, of silence standing in for understanding, I want you to know this: you still deserve respect, love, and a voice in your own home. We, who have crossed the halfway point of life, don't need to defeat anyone. We just need to reclaim our peace and our worth. Because sometimes happiness doesn't arrive with someone's apology, but with the moment we're strong enough to forgive and move on without bowing our heads. I truly want to know, where are you watching this from? Where you live? What helps you keep your dignity and your voice within your family? Share in the comments. I'll read every line, as if we were sitting together on the porch with a cup of tea, talking about life. If my story helped you see a piece of yourself, please like, subscribe, and come with me on more journeys of healing, where we learn to let go of bitterness and hold our own hearts again.